7 p.m. We will do the pledge. You can rise if you'd like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and with liberty and justice for all. All right, and a roll call, please.
Mrs. Sparber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak. Is Mrs. Pavlak here?
We don't think so.
No, okay. Mr. Rivas?
Here.
And Mrs. Witt?
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum with 6 members present. Would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? Nope. Seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
And a second.
Ryan will second.
Thank you, Ryan. And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to Superintendent Slutes.
Yeah, we have one tonight. Dr. Fuchs has been recognized by the Association of School Business Officials International for her certificate of earning a certificate of excellence. And I do want to read and share with you a little bit about what goes into earning that certificate. So it states that the reporting of the International COE Certificate of Excellence recognizes districts that have met programs' high standards for financial reporting and transparency, especially when in regard to the excellence for the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which acronym is the CAFR. The CAFR informs stakeholders about the financial and economic state of the district, making it an important communications tool for building trust and engaging with the community. So the timing is pretty impeccable, especially on the night when multiple budgets are going to be discussed and talked about. So congratulations to not only Dr. Fuchs, but the entire business office for a lot of the work that goes into earning that certificate. So congratulations to Dr. Fuchs.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your work. And
All right.
that was the only one that I had.
Perfect. So we'll move on to public comment. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. Due to COVID-19, the Board of Education meeting this evening is virtual. Those wishing to comment were instructed to email Dr. Todd Layden, superintendent, by today at 3 p.m. and he will read those comments. I think there's one.
I do have one, yes. It is from a parent in the Kaneland community with, her name is Melissa. To whom it may concern, mother of a young son, we moved here specifically for this school district. My son finished kindergarten at home through e-learning. This was from last spring. It was one of the most challenging experiences of my life and his. Every minute was agonizing for him as he struggled to listen and to sit with so many distractions at home. I understand things were put together at the last minute, but beyond just confusing for my son. My engineer husband struggled with Seesaw. The expectation to use the mouse and the cursor to write and draw as a 5-year-old was unacceptable. Every day I cried and prayed for the quarantine to end so my child could get back to his teacher, who he loved, who also brought out the best of him every day to succeed. My son has been diagnosed with ADHD, and we are awaiting other diagnoses as well, and I have no idea how to get help from the school district on these matters. My son already had a speech IEP, and guess what? His speech has regressed. His skills have regressed. His social interaction skills have regressed. He is expected to go he's supposed to go to first grade without having lived the last part of kindergarten. He's going to struggle and most likely fail without full day learning taught by people who know how to teach. It is unreasonable to expect my particular child to learn at home where he has shown me that he cannot and will not learn. This will lead to more regression of his skills, social losses, emotional struggles for both of us. When I'm the educator at the house, I am the enemy. His behaviors and emotional dysregulation are already difficult before adding 5 to 10 minutes of learning as homework. Our children have not had any help this summer, and now the fall is looking grim. Please consider lengthening the school day for students with IEPs and or 504s that need extra help, so my son can have a chance to thrive in first grade. So that is the actual public comment itself, but I also replied back to the parent who submitted this, let her know that we would be in touch with her. A district representative would be either from special education or from one of our elementary schools that they attend to make sure we can be in touch and see how the son is doing or if there's anything else that we can do, which we typically would do to follow up from any public comment.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Layden.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right. So we will move on to the consent agenda. And actually, was there a full name provided for that public comment or just was?
Just the first name.
Just the first name?
Just the first name.
Okay, so here's the following. The consent agenda contains the following action items: approval of accounts payable and payroll June 2020, approval of treasurer's report May 2020, approval of minutes of the May 27th, 2020 regular meeting, amended approval of resignations of employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from November 2018, approval of memorandum of agreement for the executive director of the Kaneland Arts Initiative, approval of handbooks for support staff, second reading, approval of policies from press, second reading, approval of superintendent contract, approval of participation in King County ROE Safe Schools program, approval of disposal of vehicles, Fox Valley Career Center, and the following informational items: the Freedom of Information Act report and the final / revised school calendar for 2019-20. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved. This is Meg.
Thank you. And a second?
Second, Teresa.
And a roll call.
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye. Sorry.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to J1, presentation of the Kaneland Return to Learn plan.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wolf here in a second is going to bring up the board memo. And so what I'll do is I'll share a couple highlights from the board memo, kind of how we got to this point today. And then we do have the executive summary to share as we've learned new information and guidance from the state, how that's changed a little bit, get some feedback from our board and answer any questions that the board has as we begin planning for the next steps. First, it's chagrined to have to share that the fall will be like any fall that we've ever had. Our return to school is going to be different. It's going to be a different kind of start of the school year for a number of factors that we'll get into here shortly. But know that over the past 5 or 6 weeks, our administration has been working hard to try to create a plan that will meet the phase 4 guidelines. So just as a reminder, phase 3 would be a remote learning plan with 10 or fewer if the Restore Illinois plan stays the same. Phase 4 is technically 50 in a space with the possibility to return to on-site learning. And then phase 5 would be a full on-site with potential other stipulations. So as we got ready to plan, we spent 5 or 6 weeks planning the return to learn with the previous phase 4 guidelines, which which I'll share in a second, has shifted since last week when we had the new phase 4 guidance released from the state board. And so with those changes, we're starting the process to be able to get some feedback. So one of the things we will do after this presentation tonight and after the board meeting tonight, we will send a parent survey out that we've been working on. So as parents, we will get that feedback. We did do a survey as we ended the year on remote learning. And one of the pieces of impetus that we got from parents was the value of on-site learning. the value of in-person learning and the request from the majority of the respondents. So one of the things we wanted to do once we saw there was to be clearly some leniency to work towards an on-site return, we completely put a hold on our current planning that we started under phase 4. And so you'll see a little bit of that again here in a second. Also wanted to clearly note and highlight that we have received numerous emails from parents in support of returning on site, some returning on site with or without masks, some feeling very strong on various sides of the conversations that we're having. And so please know that you will see that one of the stipulations we have, Tim, are you still with us? Yep, if you can shift to the executive summary now, the one I shared with you today. Thank you. One of the things that I do want to share and make very clear up in the top paragraph, it does talk about, and I know it's probably not the best presentation to read, but for the taping and for future reference, I do want to read a few things from this document to make it very clear what we're doing and why we're following what we need to. Because as I shared, we received a number of emails with various opinions and various ideas that families have had. So please know that in the second sentence that these requirements are subject to change pursuant to updated public health guidance. So as you know, and I shared previously, phase 4 had some guidance and directions that have now shifted, allowing us the potential, as you'll see down below, a full capacity model of return. Another note is that we are following and will follow is that all public and non-public schools in Illinois serving PK-12 must follow the ISB and the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines. So I think all of us have probably seen and read articles that are in support of masks or not in support of masks, that support social distancing, or some have other views. Those are fine and those are respected views, but please know that we need to follow the state board and the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines, and that's what we'll do moving forward. The other piece, as we put together the AB alternate day learning model and remote learning for phase 3, know that the state has also told us to prepare for those and be ready for those should we have a return or a resurgence of COVID-19 that will cause us to not be able to be back on site and move back to phase 3. So before I go through more of this, I do want to share a note of appreciation to Cabinet and AD team as we're working hard to put together the column you see on the left, the AB learning model. Until the middle of last week, we were able to reshift and focus the full capacity model based on the leniency and the guidance from the state board. So again, some of the main guidance that we have as we compared both of these models with Cabinet and AD team. Also like to note that we've communicated with KEA and SPEAK, and we will continue to communicate with them, getting their feedback and questions that they have too, as another stakeholder group in addition to our parent survey. So as you can see on the column, I'll just go through each of the topics across the row. But the first thing I would like to share is that in both of these models, the AB learning model and the full capacity, that teachers are and planning to be expected to be on site every day. So even if it's the AB model, or if we ever have to revert back to an AB model in phase 4 or parts of phase 4, staff would be on site and we would utilize that piece. Even with students at home or rotating from home, feedback has been that teachers in their classroom having their materials and supplies, internet capability and communication, IT supports, working from school would be preferable by most as we return to learn. So the first difference that you will see is with the AB learning model, our return of students on campus, that AB model truly follows the guidance of social distancing at 6 feet. 6 feet for every student on campus, on buses, hallways, the entire arena of school, and the return is 50% of students on campus. With the AB model, only 50 would be back at a time. Some students would follow a Monday-Thursday schedule. Other students would follow a Tuesday-Friday schedule based on their alphabet, their last name. And then Wednesdays would be a special day. Students with, as our public comment shared, additional time that's needed with students with IEPs or other students that are at risk could return on Wednesdays. So now with the new guidance that we do have, the full capacity model would allow for 100% of students on campus. So the next factors down below will kind of outline the difference between both of those and the pros and cons of working towards that. As I shared before, one of the limits on the AB model is that students would be here either on a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday schedule, and then some students coming back on Wednesdays. So the most our staff would get to see our students in that model would be 3 days a week. The Monday, Thursdays, Tuesday, Fridays, and then some additional Wednesdays. The full capacity model, face-to-face, all students would be able to at least be eligible to return all 5 days. So we would have our students back on campus in a more regular on-site manner. As I shared, one of the stipulations from the state that has not changed is the face coverings, mask or shield, when on campus, full-time. So whether it's the AB model or the full capacity model, all staff and students are required based on the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health to have a face covering all day, every day. There are some opportunities for lunches, but that is to obviously take them off while they're eating. But that's more direction and guidance as the plans is fully developed and shared. Again, the student learning area with the AB model with 14 students, 13 students in a classroom, 12 students maybe at a full AB alternating schedule, we could have all of the students more closely or extremely close to 6 feet apart for social distancing. While the guidance does say that, let me look at the exact wording. It says social distancing to be observed as much as possible. So that is part of the guidance that was changed as opposed to the strict 6-foot social distancing expectation that we've had. So now with that guidance shifted to as much as possible, we could have the students back, but we also know that if there are 23 students in our classroom, we would not be able to social distance quite as effectively and regularly for all students back on site. So there are, as you'll see as we go through both of these, pros and cons to both of them. The lunches on the AB learning model, students would be able to spread out more regularly and use a cafeteria area more often. With the full capacity model at 50 students in a designated area, those designated areas may change. The middle school, high school, and maybe even some of the elementaries at times, based on students and a full return, would have to be creative and flexible as far as how they get their lunch, when they get their lunch. One of the other pieces of the guidance for lunches was not to have a cafeteria style. So you will probably see more, and parents and families will see more of a grab and go type lunch option rather than the regular, if they purchase their lunch by getting a tray, getting in line, and then going through the line in a cafeteria type style. So it would be more of a grab and go. Another key factor that changed as far as allowing flexibility, or at least the opportunity for a full capacity return, is the busing. One of the things we had previously learned or understood was that with buses, that we would have to social distance the same way, every other seat, every other row. And now with buses also considered a space up to 50 students, we can technically, with the new guidance, have 50 riders or 50 riders or fewer on a bus at the same time. And again, we would, either model, we would strategically look at placing students, putting family members together as much as possible, and allowing single seats as much as possible for families. And the one thing I didn't note here, but another piece that was a big change also was the temperature screening and health screening. In the previous guidance and the previous understanding before last Wednesday was that districts would have to scan and screen every single student and every single staff member coming into a building prior to the start of the day. We have learned in this guidance that now there is the flexibility to self-certify with staff and students with proper education, proper signage, proper permission from staff members and students' parents, signifying that they do understand, they've answered the questions, they understand them, students don't have temperatures, and then they can come to school. Those are a number of the highlights and the differences. And please also know that I take full responsibility for a email that went to the media newspaper last week. I hit send, and then I jumped on this webinar right afterwards, and then this webinar from the ISBE outlined a number of these changes. So that AB model is the model that we believe is the best for Kaneland if we do some sort of a split schedule. Split schedule options have been AB days, half days. We can't do that with transportation. And then week on, week off, those were models that districts were discussing. And out of those models, the AB model is the model that we will use and we would select if the full capacity model doesn't work. So with that, I know it was pretty lengthy. I had read some of it, but I also wanted to share it. I do know that a number of parents have asked for the presentation. We're going to log in and to watch it prior to the survey coming out. So we wanted to make sure that we laid out as much of the information as clearly as possible. So with that, if there are any other cabinet members who, based on our discussions, want to share any other information, they're welcome to, and or as part of board members' questions or feedback, we can talk through any questions that board members have too. So with that, President Sparber, I'll let you either decide how you want to take questions or.
Sure. Did any other cabinet member want to jump in, or should we go to board questions?
I think a cabinet member would be good first. If there is anything, they may be able to share information and answer questions.
So we say, no one's jumping in there. Any board? Oh, is that Gail?
I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail.
Gail.
Hi, Gail. All right, so we're doing questions on the return to learn plan. Does any board member have a question?
I do. Can you guys hear me?
At the moment we can.
Okay. So I have a few, but I'll stick with this one for now. Todd, do you know, is our plan to give options to parents if they want those options, or is it to be kind of a uniform thing?
Good question. At this point right now, Aaron, our alternate option would be based on medical conditions, medical concerns. So at this point, families or staff members that need to, want to, or elect to stay home, their options would be a medical request from a doctor, or as much as we would hate to lose families to homeschooling, homeschooling is another option that families have discussed, not just in Kaneland, but statewide and nationwide, if there are concerns over any of the return to learn models.
So I know we don't really have any obligations to homeschool students, but is there things that we're considering maybe because of the circumstances to help support those kinds of families?
You know what, I will let either Dr. Mumm or Mr. Raleigh answer that question, because I know that they've had more in-depth conversation with both of their grade spans on alternative plans or homeschooling.
Can you repeat the last part, the end part of the question? I believe it cut off.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Dr. Mumm?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So my question was, I know we really don't have any obligations to our homeschool parents because they're not part of our district, but because of the circumstances, is it maybe do we change our mind on that? Do we offer some kind of support services or just, ideas, a curriculum, something like that, or for those who would be opting out?
We do even with homeschooling over the past 10 or so years, any family that has one of the 6 schools keeps a email group that once they see an email has come through to our school messenger for the whole community, they forward to their new student group. On the last one, and thank you to you, Meg, for catching the incoming kindergartners, we have that in a separate email group within Tyler until the rollover happens. Once the rollover happens to our new school year, our incoming kindergartners and our new students are all included in our school messenger system. But until then, our incoming kindergarten, when we start registering them in February, they are housed in a separate email group just within the Tyler system. And so for this survey that's coming out later this evening, we are asking to either, if the rollover has not been completed, because it happens this week, if it hasn't been completed as of tonight, we are going to forward the message to the technology department, who will then forward out the message to all incoming kindergartners, as well as our new student email groups.
Dr. Mum, I checked earlier tonight. The rollover is going to be after June 30th. And so we will have to have tech send this out tomorrow or the next day. I can't do it from my system.
Just an FYI, Tim, because I don't know if you can see the chat. I did get 3 texts that the live stream went down about 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, it was a power issue.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Okay.
If they refresh, it's a new link.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Can you tell us more about the AB plan? So what do they do on their days off? Will they get 50% of the coursework? Will they have all self-guided virtual on those off days? What does that look like?
Sarah, yeah, again, I know you're about to answer. And then when you finish, Patrick, if you can share a little bit about what it would look like 6/12.
On the Wednesdays, which Todd had mentioned is kind of a meant for a small group meeting day, IEP students, RTI students may come in, or other students that may have occupational therapy and those types of smaller group experiences. Other students will have online small groups like guided reading groups, guided math, or a check-in with a literature circle, and Patrick can talk about the 6/12 ones. On their off day, I guess, or online learning day, let's say they go on a Monday, Thursday, on Tuesday, Fridays, they would be doing all their application projects and work. And so when they are in school face-to-face, they will have a compacted curriculum model, which would go through 2 lessons or 1.5 lessons per face-to-face day, with the application and practice time on their online day. And that would be self-guided and self-paced, so that some students may be able to tutor others. They may be able to work in group projects together. They may be able to do some internship hours or work hours out in the community. And then they could self-pace and do the application and project-based work on their online day. Patrick, do you want to talk about the 6/12?
Yep, 6/12 would follow that same structure. So while they're in class on their on-site days, they would be receiving instruction in a variety of different ways. It could be coming from the teacher, it could be from small group, focus group instruction. And then the off-site days is going to be the application piece, the homework piece, knowing that it's going to be a little bit different than what it has looked like this past spring, where it truly was remote. And each day I had access to my teacher. It's a little bit different on those AB days, because while I may be off-site as a student, my teacher's instructing on-site kids. So they don't have necessarily direct access on their off-site day. So it is that more self-directed practice. And then when they come back on their next on-site day, it's picking up where their curriculum left off. We have some flexibility. We have some professional development that we can offer if AB model is happening, where teachers are really going to look at either their reported standards that they have written or their state standards, and really start to prioritize what those are, see where those connections can be made between standards, because we're really looking to maximize our time when we're face-to-face with our teachers to get those lessons, to be able to do those application pieces back home. So we have a few hours set aside, a couple different places in the summer leading up to that first time, where teachers can get together in either their grade level teams, their departments, and really start to look at how can I start to compact my curriculum to maximize that in-person time.
And one thing that will occur, to add on a little bit of what Mr. Raleigh was saying, in both models, we did collect information about what was taught and learned with Fidelity from the spring. And so in both models, the curriculum will be reviewed to resequence a bit from any gaps of learning that happened in the spring that can carry over into the fall or the next grade level, or a content that's similar. And so even in full capacity, we are having the staff work on kind of a resequencing based on what we've learned in the spring part as well.
Thank you.
So I have a question
go ahead.
about,
Yeah, jump in, Teresa.
oh, sorry, what it would look like for the staff member that is either has a compromised immune system or another medical reason that they can't come and be on site 5 days a week. Will they be asked to do telecommute from home and do something else? And if so, what would that be? And if not, are they required to take leave? I guess just what does that look like for staff?
From a learning perspective and instruction perspective, what will likely happen is we're going to have students that fall in that same boat that have some medical exemptions, and to the best of our ability, knowing what is best for kids, we would first look to see if there is a teacher that is working remotely that we can pair up with a small group of students and be more of that remote style teacher, similar to what we've done in this past spring. Dr. Atkins, I know there's a HR component to that question, so I'll let you handle that, but we would need to see who those teachers are, what they're certified to teach and what grade level that falls out, and then see where the community stands and what students wouldn't be able there to start to make some pretty targeted connections between those groups.
Correct. And then as far as identifying who those staff might be, grade levels and that kind of thing, after this meeting, we'll be sending an email to all staff that outlines a process where they can notify me via email or in writing of their intent to self-isolate. And then they'll have till July 31st to provide the medical documentation from their doctor about that. That will look similar to the leave inquiry process that we currently have in place. They would identify whether they need to completely just self-isolate and not work, whether they can self-isolate and work from home, whether how long that isolation would be, whether it's maybe I've contracted COVID and just need the 10 days, or I have a condition where I might need to be out until the I don't know what the right phrasing is, the wave, the infection has passed, whatever. But we would need medical certification for that. As far as the leaves that go with it, it would be a combination or blend of a variety of things depending on each individual person's situation. Under the law, under the CARES Act, there's some provisions for additional days. It extends beyond the limitations provided in the CARES Act. Then that would be sick day usage. And then from there would be the possibility, just like anyone during the course of the year anyway, to take an FMLA leave, a leave of absence, all those kinds of things. And each option has different potential implications in terms of being on contract or off contract, utilizing sick days, et cetera. So it's a little difficult to give you a one size fits all response to what would happen with a staff member, because everybody is different. And so we will be taking each situation uniquely. With that notification, that medical certification, will do whatever they need to do. And then that's where that second part that Mr. Raleigh referred to would then kick into play. Okay, what's a reasonable accommodation? What needs do we have as a district? And how can we pair those up to get some fruitful work and time from our employees if they're able to work while they're at home?
And you maybe have touched on this, but does that also include on-site accommodations if needed?
Any medical request or medically backed request for reasonable accommodations is evaluated by the HR department, sometimes in conjunction with the business office to see if it is reasonable. And there has to be a determination made for each individual case. But yes, reasonable accommodations could be made, but working through that conversation about what reasonable is always starts with the employee letting us know what they feel is reasonable and us then looking at our capacity to handle that request.
I don't have it in front of me. When does school start?
August 12th.
You're telling me from July 31st to August 12th, you're going to figure all that out?
We're going to have to, yes.
You can't speed up your deadlines of when they have to get their notes in or intentions?
I do believe we could, but at the same time, we have to be practically reasonable with people's ability to get in to see their doctors.
But you're also hoping that they email you before a doctor visit if possible.
Right, that we're going to ask them to email me the 10th of their intent. So that's why it's a two-step process. Then they have that grace period to get the medical note to us. So that way it's really not the 31st to the 12th. It's really the July 10th to the 12th.
And we've unofficially had a couple staff members reach out, and parents already reach out and let us know what might be happening based on what we do. So we do have an idea of a few that have already shared some of their situations with us.
I think they need the plan first.
Yes.
You know, it's tough to, they're guessing too at this point.
I appreciate that you're being flexible, you know, with staff and families, and you know, it's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
So too.
So Todd, you mentioned about the variety of people, the variety of emails you've gotten, their concerns and what have you. So say we do go to the full capacity. Will it be, is there a choice for a hybrid situation where those parents that totally don't want to send their children to school at this moment?
Not with the full capacity, there's the two different options. There's the full capacity. So if a family can't meet that, or based on their circumstances can't do that, then there's technically not a hybrid model for them. The hybrid model is the AB flexible day for the 2 days a week at school and then the 2 days at home. So if we do as a district decide to go to full capacity model, their option would be with a medical note staying from home or homeschooling at this time.
You don't have the ability to put a camera and a microphone on the teacher and let them watch from home?
That is something that we have not finalized that. We want to continue to investigate that, because again, that would bring on some staffing questions and some concerns that we would just need to put together. So it's something we don't have planned at this time, but based on the feedback from the survey, based on additional dialogue with Speak and KEA, we will investigate to see if that's feasible at all.
And a follow-up question. We haven't touched base on anything in reference to extracurricular activities, whether it be the arts, the choirs, the bands, and of course the sports. That question is out there. What are the plans for those?
Athletics and activities right now, the Illinois High School Association, IHSA, they are still trying to determine when they're going to go to their part 2, because their part 2 matches our phase 4. So right now, activities sponsors and coaches have been able to start some workouts, but Kaneland's specific plan through Mr. Rollman at the high school, their possible return could be July 6th, if indeed the Illinois High School Association gets approval from that plan from the Illinois Department of Public Health. So I apologize for the acronyms, but the IHSA is waiting on approval from the Illinois Department of Public Health. Once they give the IHSA approval for phase 4, or the equivalency of the state's phase 4, then on-site practices and sport-specific skills can begin.
How do you do the social distancing in that?
That's part of the concern right now, and I believe that's part of the reason why the Illinois Department of Public Health hasn't approved the IHSA's Part 2 guidance for the next step. So I think they're trying to see how they can go about and do that safely for all sports. And that will be a challenge, Mr. Rivas, for sure.
I've got several questions. So first one being, what happens if little Johnny refuses to wear his mask and shows up for school?
Yeah, that is an email and a view of some parents that we've received some feedback, not only in Kaneland, but again, the state and the country. We do have the right as a district to put plans and requirements into place. And so if that is the requirement based on the ISBE and the Illinois Department of Public Health that it is right now, we would fully expect staff members to work through it just like we would any other progressive discipline question. So what we'd have to do, Mr. Carey, is clearly delineate, is it something we're working with a student who's fidgety and having trouble just keeping it on versus a direct non-compliance question. So that is one we're still getting to the bottom of, but from our district legal counsel, we have been told that we do have the right to make that mandate, and we can fully enforce that by having students sent home. We hope that they would comply and be able to stay at school, but we do have the right to send somebody home if they're not in compliance.
Hey, Ryan, can I jump in really quick? Is that okay? It's just a piggyback on your idea, because so going along with what Ryan's saying, another concern I was having, or question I was having, was just concerning behavior as it is. I mean, if you look through the IDPH document, it lists all these behavioral modifications that we're going to do from now on. And I was thinking, we've always wanted students not to put their mouth over the entire water fountain, right? Like, we've never wanted them to do that. We've always wanted students to wash their hands better. So to say, oh, we're going to fix this now, we've been trying to fix it and we haven't been successful at it so far. So, like, what are we going to do differently to try to address it? Because now it comes with a much more serious price tag, right? Like, if you put your mouth over the water fountain, no one can use that water fountain to come and disinfect it and everything. Right? So, do we have a different behavioral plans, or behavioral specialists now looking at this?
I think one of the things that we would do, and as we're investigating those steps, Aaron, I think I heard your entire question, but we would obviously send more information home to parents about what is expected, what's not expected, what we can do and what we can't do. We would have a greatly increased amount of signage up on the drinking fountains, turn some of them off to some degree, only let some of the bottles or the drinking fountains where you can push the bottle. So those are some of the recourse that we can take. And a lot of it will be videos sent home to parents, teaching them the expectations, walking through students through it, the expectation walks that we have now of being quiet between classes, of holding up 1, 2, 3, those types of things. Now the expectations would just change as far as how you're staying apart from each other, how you're wearing your mask, drinking fountains, washing hands, how long you're washing hands. There's gonna have to be a lot of educational guidance that we're gonna be sending home to parents, and working with our staff to make sure our staff's reinforcing with our students.
And I think a good portion to start the school year is going to be practicing those things, because we can send lots of things home. We can have the conversations, but that's a different conversation that we have not prior to COVID had. We've always talked about, be sure to wash your hands, be sure to give space or not put your mouth on the water fountain. Now that is backed by 3-4 months worth of a global pandemic that has been the talk of all parents and community members and all of that piece. So I think there's a little bit more teeth to those conversations, and we need to be more intentional when we begin the year of not only make sure you're not doing this, but we need to make sure we're not doing this because it could have a harmful effect on all of our classmates, on all of our friends, on all of our teachers. So I think the social emotional piece to returning to school is not only physically being back in the building and physically being around each other again, but it's connecting and being more deliberate into the why we need to be doing things, and certainly why we can't be doing certain things.
Are you expecting more guidance before the school year starts from the state?
That is a great question, because in the guidance, there was another quote that said there's an indication that there will be more guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health still to follow. So yes, and that is part of our frustration and hesitancy to put a plan together and share it publicly too quick. We want it as quick as possible so staff members and families can make their decisions, but also being able to edit it properly to meet any new guidelines or changes that do come. So yes, we are expecting additional guidance from the health department.
All right. The self-certification that you've mentioned, how often is that required to happen? And do you have any idea how that will be documented, or what? I mean, am I supposed to fill out 2 forms every day for my 2 kids and send it on the bus with them, or have you gotten that far?
We have seen the guidance. It's a great question, Ryan. The guidance is right now, there are a series of questions that you ask for. A parent would ask a student, or a caregiver would ask their student, or that staff members would have to fully evaluate and then do your temperature check every day. But what we're finding, or what we're seeing in the self-certification, is whether we do it through the registration process, whether we do it through a one-time sign-off, it is not something that parents would need to self-certify daily. They could certify as a family that the Carey family read it, understand it. We will check with our 2 daughters every day, and by sending them to school every day, we hereby certify that they met all of the obligations and questions and are healthy to return to school, or healthy to come to school on a daily basis.
Okay, so being realistic, kids get sent to school sick every day. What do we do in a situation where mom and dad both have to go to work, so little Johnny goes to school with, could be the flu, could be the sniffles, could be COVID. We won't know, I guess, until what, a test that happens at some point in the future?
Yeah, these are, I think that question that you posed right there is the one where we need to finalize all of the subtle intricacies, because if somebody does come down to the office, districts are in the guidance talked about having a quarantine room that is somewhere separate from the nurse's office, because the nurse's office deals with lots of things outside of COVID-19. So we're still working through the steps of what it would look like when a student comes down sick, the communication piece to parents from that classroom or on that bus or in that small group or the bus stop. So those are some of the communications and final steps we're finalizing.
All right, I'll keep going unless someone else has questions.
I have one.
I read in the directions that it's only 50 people per bus either way. So do we have enough buses to actually make that work? You're mute. There you go.
Dr. Fuchs?
We're working on that. When it was the AB schedule, we did believe that we have enough buses. We are working on the numbers for the full capacity model. I'm assuming that we do, but I can confirm that in a couple weeks once we have a chance to make sure.
All right, the memo that came out this afternoon showed the participation statistics throughout the district over last spring. I'm getting confused the time of year. I would say they're less than stellar. So if we are forced to an AB model, or I believe we're going to go back to another flare up is going to happen in the fall when all the kids to get together and change germs with each other. I think we're going to get forced back to everybody stays home. That's a 2-part question. So do you have ideas or thoughts as to what they can do better so that if we do go with AB, their kids are more engaged? And I guess at some point in the future, you probably haven't even started on it, but is there a plan for full remote learning later on?
Mr. Carey, let me provide the rest of the cabinet members a quick update on what you received and what board members received today. And as you saw in the board packet, there was a FOIA request from a newspaper reporter, I think it was Channel 7. They were looking for feedback and data on our percent of students that were engaged in the remote learning. It wasn't just our district, it was a number of districts. So Patrick and Sarah, what our board members received was some data that you guys kept and provided for Julianne for the FOIA. So based on that and some of the conversation that we've had to increase engagement, you feel free to, from your respective areas, to fill that in for Mr. Carey.
I think there's a lot of differences between the spring remote learning and fall online learning. In the spring, it was kind of unknown at the start of how long and the duration. And the state and the governor came out with some very directive things, such as no harm can be done. Students already had a grade, they already had a relationship. And also the minutes of learning were dictated by the state at that point. And some of the maximum minutes were 90 to 120. Going into fall online learning, if we have to go back to a phase 2 where everyone is remote, both staff and students, already many of those things would not apply. There would not be a previous grade. And so students, that no harm clause to grading could not apply. They would still have to earn a grade, and therefore immediately engagement has to go up because you have to work for your total grade to be earned versus relying on a grade you had right around spring break time. The other thing that we've heard in our guidance from some of our regional office our curriculum meetings from the King County Regional Office is if we go back to phase 2 in the fall or winter of this year, the state has already shifted their philosophy a bit on the amount of learning minutes, and almost instead of capping them at 90 to 120 for any grade span maximum, they would want to go back to replicate more a full learning day. So I think if we went to phase 2, which we have been working on that plan already, just to have, in case of that shifting back later in the fall or winter, it would be more replicating. I log on for period 1. I may have some application time where I get to take some time off, but then my second content blocker period begins, so I need to go back to live meetings. We've also shifted quite a bit of our understanding of live meetings and Zoom meetings and Google Meets meetings, and having them at the younger grades. There have been more security measures put into place by the companies that have those live meetings that would allow us to have younger students to have live Zooms with their teachers, which in the spring, those security measures were not in place, and there was not a comfort level for K2 students to have live meetings. Patrick, did I miss anything?
No, I think that really recaps. I think the biggest piece that may have needed the motivation was that do no harm, right? I could have an A going into break, and I can rely on that A is going to be there.
Just me, or is Patrick Preble?
Yeah, Patrick Revenue.
You're rowdy, roughly.
Sarah, can you interpret?
I think, yeah, he was reiterating the no harm clause, and really, that was a piece in the spring that really tied some of the engagement, because that governor's issuing of no student can regress in their grade automatically when sharing that. And we made the decision to be transparent as a district with parents. I know some districts chose not to share that message and as readily as we did, and that decrease the level of engagement. If I already had an A and there was a no harm clause, then I would not have to continue to get that A. And luckily that no harm clause will not be present in another phase 2.
All right. You can hear me now that and then.
Nope.
You can type it maybe in the chat and then we can read it.
I have one last question. So I'm assuming this plan will come together, and are we going to have a special meeting in order for the board to approve it, or where's that go moving forward?
Yep, I didn't share that. Good question. I didn't share that earlier, but as part of this guidance from the state, board approval is not required or needed from this. The superintendent does have authority to bring together a team of people to create a plan. So based on the survey, based on the follow-up from the survey and what we learn as we put it together, it is not required. Some boards are having more dialogue on it and may want to take action, but it is not required.
I would consider myself one of the board wants to have an opinion on what happens here and a vote on what the plan is. and not leave it all up to the administration to, well, I guess there's going to be negative consequences no matter what. So parents are going to not be happy. Teachers are not going to be, there's going to be an unhappy principal as part of whatever you do. So I think having the board support whatever your decision was with a vote would be important. I mean, deciding when the kids go to school is kind of what we approve the calendar of when they go, we approve their curriculum. I think a plan like this should also be approved by the board.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I second it, at least be able to hear what we're going to do.
So I appreciate that, you know, that it's not that we want to tell the administration exactly what they need to do in their own area of expertise, which is not what Ryan, you know, at first that's what I thought Ryan wanted, you know, was like the board to weigh in on those types of things. I understand the need for support, but if we, you know, if we say now that we have confidence in what the administration decides and we, you know, appreciate and respect their expertise, I don't know that we would need to actually have a vote. I also don't want it to appear that the board has, you know, has power that it doesn't.
I don't understand your last comment.
So if we vote on it, it appears that we have the ability to alter the plan and things, and Todd has made it clear that we really don't have the power to make those changes.
See, and I got a different interpretation. I think the board has the power to decide when the kids go to school.
I think there is.
Don't think you're right.
That's fine. I mean,
right.
You can tell me I'm wrong. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's a debate, not a.
Right. I mean, I think it's I mean, it's been put to the administrations of school districts. That's their expertise. As long as they're taught, we might want to weigh in on things like, hey, we want to make sure, you talk a little bit to the stakeholders and the community members, and we make sure that you're communicating everything clearly. But I just don't think we have the knowledge of the day in and day out in order to make that decision.
And I guess deciding all the kids go back versus an A/B day model, I don't think that requires a degree of expertise in education.
So I think it does. I think that, your staff members, how well they're able to telecommute or not, how your facilities and the capacity that you have, and how well you'll be able to social distance and take care of some of these other things. I disagree. And I think that there is experience and expertise in working at in the school district every day that we don't have.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
I don't think there's a lot of experience in working against what we're facing as far as the COVID. But let me ask it a different way, Todd. How much flexibility do we have of the things that are going to be, in a sense, mandated to us? How much flexibility? I can think of just one as an example, and you kind of covered it earlier. We can choose to check everybody's temperature as they come in, or let them do it themselves and trust that they did it. That's the flexibility in a sense. Is there other things that, and they're probably a big list, but if you want to hit the high notes, I appreciate it.
Yeah, the ideas shared in the executive summary are a lot of those high notes, but please know that in addition to the one you just referenced, Mr. Rivas, as far as the temperature, there are probably hundreds that we're going to have to look at and work through, whether the quarantine room is over here, whether we pay somebody to supervise us cafeterias, whether kids use this route going outside, whether they pick up a lunch and go back to their classroom, all of those are internal conversations that we need to have by grade span because they will look different. Harder's lunch will look different than the high school's lunch, which will look different than the elementaries. So those smaller pieces, they're absolutely numerous. And every time the guidance changes, sometimes those get flexed and changed a little bit too.
While we're on this topic of those kind of little things, Mr. Payton and I met today with ABM, which is our contracted cleaning service. They have what's called an enhanced cleaning program. They shared the program with us today. They are going to be putting together some information for us based on the feedback that we give them after tonight and tomorrow of what our plan is. They will be able to give us a plan on how they can do enhanced cleaning for the schools, which is required under the guidance. And so that's another piece of the operations and decisions that have to be made between now and when we start. So, but I was very excited about some of the things that we talked about this morning. So.
And I do
put you on the spot because we're disagreeing, which is fine, but the parents are going to get a survey voiced to get their opinion as to what should happen. Shouldn't the board have the same opportunity? Or how do you differentiate the two? Just because I really don't understand. I understand what you're saying. I guess I don't agree with you, which is fine, but I'm trying to understand the perspective.
Well, for the board to have the same input as the parents, we would just be responding to the survey, not voting yes or no.
Okay, fair enough.
So we're just hearing them out. We're not acting on it.
Well, if we approve tonight, we'd be doing so before the survey results even came in.
Well, there's nothing to approve tonight. It's not a vote item. What I was suggesting was whenever the administration finalizes whatever version it is, I don't know what that is, that we get the opportunity to say yes or no on, and I guess it's more just to support the administration too, as to, I think there's going to be a lot of unhappy parents with no matter what the administration decides. And it just seems to me that that's part of our job, but I've said my piece, so I'll be quiet.
Todd, can you remind me of the timeline, exactly how this works? You guys hear me?
The timeline of how this works?
Okay, yeah, that's
well, the one thing as your board members were having this conversation, one of the things I noted was our next meeting is July 27th, which puts it after probably a decision needs to be made and shared. So the other consideration that the board could have to have more feedback as we finalize a plan, whether or not the board would prefer or have interest in a board meeting, especially just to receive updated information on what the plan could look like or what the plan that's recommended, whether the board wants to vote or not. Again, it's not needed, but at least to provide what the plan is in a public forum. That way it's on tape again. We are happy to schedule that. That is something that President Sparber, you could direct us to do, or if there's board preference for that, we would be happy to come back and share that with the board.
Yes, I was thinking, even if we just had another discussion, right? It didn't necessarily have to be a vote, but just like another opportunity to discuss before the plan was finalized, that we might have more information from IDPH, we might have more ISB information. You'll have probably a clearer idea of where the plan might look like, with a little bit more nuts and bolts. So it might be useful to have at least one more round of discussion.
What do other board members think?
I'm obviously in favor of it.
Likewise.
I think I'm seeing nods. I only have some people, so other people might be nodding and I don't see you. But do we want to take a, I hate to start planning meetings here, but considering the time frame, I also want information out to everyone. Would July 6th. Is that a Monday? Would that make sense for administration first and then board members?
I don't feel like that would give them enough time.
But I think if, go ahead.
It's only
Yeah,
a week and a half.
Yeah, we probably need something, because the survey is going to be completed that weekend. We would need, or next weekend, what's the Friday, the 3rd?
But you're having a communication to parents that week, right?
That's when we anticipated at the earliest of that week. So what we would need to do then is, if the board does want to meet, because again, the survey's closed on Friday, to be able to compile all of it and act on it, we would need a couple days next week to have more of that conversation. So towards the end of the following week, 8th, 9th, so I think, I don't have my calendar.
Yeah, 8th is a Wednesday, 9th is a Thursday.
Right.
Something later that week, whether we do it remotely so we can do it quicker, that's fine, or in person, something like that would give us enough time to have that conversation internally and then with the board.
So I'm not understanding. So if we're not voting, it would just be an opportunity for the administration to put out a recording? Is that, I mean, if we're not going to vote on it, do we need to take time away from cabinet formulating the plan for students in order to appease us wanting to talk about it again?
That is a great question. That's what I would imagine 4 of our board members, or 5 or 6 or 7, have to determine if they would like to have that, or we could do it in writing with a full plan sent. The board preference on this is something I would be interested to hear.
I wouldn't need a special meeting myself. If you gave us an update or sent us, advance, information that's printed and electronic that we can look at, then we'd be seeing it. And because at the time, it's going to be frightfully close to when you're going to need to, pull the trigger on things. And so you're not necessarily going to even really, not that you won't listen to our feedback, but it's not a vote. It'll be pretty much decided by the time we hear it. So does it need to be a back and forth, or can it just be a push out?
Well, I guess to break that into 2 parts, did we reach consensus on a vote or not a vote? Because that would form my opinion on the rest of it.
I don't think we did on a vote or no vote. We want to make that decision first. Does anyone, I mean, I guess thumbs up, except I can't see everyone unless someone else can. with a vote. Teresa's no. Ryan's a yes.
I don't think we need a vote. I think it's just a matter of the board is either behind you or not. And that conversation is important.
And I don't know if it needs to be a vote either. I just think that this is a really big decision, and I think it's worthwhile having slow it down a little bit just for a moment and talk it through one more time before the final rubber stamp is put in.
I could go.
Oh, go ahead, Pedro.
I could go either way. At the end of the day, I think it's a lot of it's going to be mandated on us. Todd does have a difficult decision to make at the end of the day. And on top of that, so they pulled phase 5 and now they're saying, okay, we're in phase 4. We're still going to do phase 5. Along with that, they also send we're protecting you.
What?
And so if people decide, if something happens, another breakout, people start getting sick, if you will, taking it home or what have you, are we as a district protected?
Oh, liable?
Yes, liable.
Okay.
Dr. Fuchs, can you share, as we went to remote learning in the first place, the insurance company had feedback on that. What kind of feedback did the insurance company provide in these types of situations typically?
Yeah. So in addition to the insurance company, I've also been on a number of webinars similar to you, Dr. Layden. Some of my webinars have discussed liability. First of all, it would probably, there would have to be proof that the school district was responsible for that person who became ill. So that proof is going to be most likely difficult to prove, but nonetheless, it could be done. Secondly is most likely it will probably go to court and the courts will probably decide. And so at this point, there's no definitive answer to who's going to be liable when either a student or a staff member gets sick with COVID. What's important though is that we are following all of the IDPH guidelines specifically related to the things that we've talked about tonight. Social distancing, cleaning, signage, isolation room where if a contamination room until parents can pick kids up. If we're following all of those IDPH guidelines, which we are studying, discussing, and working through, if you put no more than 50 kids in a room, those are the things that will help to protect the district. It doesn't guarantee 100% protection, but it certainly builds a stronger case should we become a lawsuit for something that happens.
And additionally to that, Mr. Rivas, everything that we do decide would be based on the state guidance or any of the state shifting through the Illinois Department of Public Health. And we would have it fully vetted through Maureen Lemon, legal counsel also.
Back to the original question. Again, Ms. Flayden, I know you have a difficult decision to make altogether. So at least a informational, whether it's a meeting or not, I go either way.
For me, for the vote, I think I feel like this topic is ever changing, and then if we vote, I would be concerned that we would be the administration would be hamstrung a little bit, that they couldn't continue to adapt. And I think they're going to need to. I think we'll go through multiple models this year. So I guess I'm hesitant to vote in that respect. And I guess I also do feel like as a board and basically as the superintendent's boss, we always have the option to intervene. So I guess I always just assume if something is heading in a direction that we're not supporting as a board, we could act. But and I hear what you're saying, Ryan, that you're kind of wanting potentially even to be supportive. So I'm just sort of, I'm not kind of following down that path, but more just the other way, saying we always could intervene if needed. But I guess I'm hesitant to vote. So I think the majority is saying no vote. Did the majority say to have a meeting? I think Meg said yes, Aaron said yes, Pedro, you said information. Ryan, where are you at?
Yes.
Yes for a meeting?
Yes, and virtual is fine, just so we have the opportunity to exchange ideas or ask questions.
And I think that for me, I could go either way because Todd enjoys the regular phone calls, but I think if enough people want a meeting, we should look to have one, unless that's going to, I mean, I think the board's already said yes, but for me, unless I want parents to be able to get communicated, I think you guys need to get information out to teachers so they can say if they have any concerns. I do think we can't slow down the process too much as well, but
to take myself off the fence, yes. I want.
You're yes too? All right.
Yes.
So
take me off the fence.
Maybe around the 8th.
Whenever, as far as when the meeting is, it's whatever the administration thinks is going to be the best time to communicate to us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that date is, so
we'll probably publish it in this week sometime.
Yeah, we meet cabinet meets tomorrow to review all of the feedback from Ad Team today and from any board feedback. So then what we could do is we could put together a logical sequence of timeline that would, or a timeline that would work for a next meeting based on communicating with parents and then the follow-up typical regular scheduled meeting we have for the 27th. So after we meet tomorrow, we could determine what date is best.
And as far as any community members who are listening, I mean, that will be posted on the website with at least 3 days notice, right?
48 hours, yeah, 2 days. 48.
2 days.
Mhm.
I would assume
good.
You wouldn't need a quorum at that meeting. We won't be voting on anything, right? So we would not need a quorum.
Oh, you're getting technical on me.
Okay. Do we need the quorum just to call the meeting to order? I mean, yeah, you're right. We wouldn't be voting on anything. I don't know the legality.
Just can't take action.
Yeah.
We can meet and discuss, but just can't take action.
Hopefully we'll have a quorum, but or if we won't, helpful to know in advance. But yeah, we would not be taking action, but maybe we could share if need be.
Well, if we are agreeing to potentially have a meeting, I would hope that those people that are saying yes will actually attend. And
I would
we'll
imagine.
take care out of it, take that element out of that.
Yeah. So Todd, how have the parents? I know we've had some communication with parents and just asking about the dialogue of the decision and how they can have input. Kind of what's the parent process in this to have input?
With that survey tomorrow, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to do the survey. We'll go out later tonight, and then tomorrow we will get that feedback. I think one of the things we're fortunate is that our parents are so engaged in their students' academic experience that they regularly reach out to us. So those that may not have had a formal option prior to the survey still regularly reach out to us. And then the other option that we would do or think about is after the plan is fully finalized and shared with the community, we need to determine cabinet-wise what kind of community participation we would do at that point. Parent meetings on site are always ideal, but if they can only be 50, that's going to be a challenging, piece. I do know that one of the other ideas we had put together, whether it's the AB model or the full capacity model, is coming up with videos and snippets to show parents what the school day is going to look like and send those out to parents. So that would be another way in which that we could communicate to our parents.
At least for me too, I also think just maybe trying different methods of communicating and getting feedback from parents when the fall starts. I feel like there was a bit of, kind of a disconnection. Maybe it was just me that happened in the spring with just everything going on. But I don't know if there's different ways that we can connect, especially if you're maybe not going to have some of the back to school nights or some of the things that we're used to, just as creative as administration can be, especially without those relationships developed. I think will be really helpful to parents to feel like they have avenues to just have a dialogue. Because I know a lot of people do call our administrative team, and I think they're great about taking those phone calls and really have a personal response. But I think some people don't use that avenue, don't think about it as much if they don't have those relationships.
It's a good point. Thank you. We will definitely consider those because I know there's part of the guidance too. They recommended due to social distancing to not have some of those types of nights. The curriculum nights, the back to school nights, that is in there too. And they recommend not having those, which is a challenge because those are the, as you said, Mrs. Barber, that's some of the most formative nights is when they can come back and see their supplies and materials. So we will continue to investigate ways to try to communicate and get parents on site in a way that's doable and supported by the IDPH.
And I will take the topic back a second. I know our intention at board meetings isn't to use our chat feature, but we used it a little bit tonight when people had technical issues, one being Patrick. I think he put something in chat he wanted shared, which I don't know if I could maybe even get there and read. Did I see that?
Read it for you.
Thank you.
It was the question that was about spring engagement and how that will look different to increase the engagement levels. The first response was very similar to what we had said. The state has already put out written recommendations urging all districts to go back to pre-COVID grading practices and that no harm clause on grading would not exist in future remote learning. Based on the feedback from parent survey as well, because we did take that spring parent survey that was collected in May, both for practices for if we have to do remote again, but there was also the suggestion of, for fall learning, what would you like it to look like? And making the AB model and the full capacity model, we did take that into consideration. And then regarding spring remote learning, he wrote, we have begun to draft ideas and expectations that vary for engagement and motivation based on the different grade spans.
Great, thank you. So anything else on this topic?
I actually had
Go
one.
ahead, Tracy.
Oh, sorry, it'll be quick. Well, the answer may not be. Going back to the topic of social and emotional issues, and you know, this is a unique situation. It's caused a lot of stress in families. It's caused financial stress. It's caused emotional stress. You know, some family members, you know, some kids may be coming back having lost family members or having had family members gravely ill for a time. Are we stepping up our SEL game a little bit? Are we going to make sure that will there be more availability of counselors and social workers? And are those social workers and counselors having any additional training in order to be prepared for it?
Dr. Mum, can you share some of those things that we had discussed?
Some of the things, yes, we don't necessarily have more social workers or guidance counselors. So literally the availability is still the availability that has been in the past, simply because we haven't been able to increase those two areas in staffing. But what we have looked at is possible revamping of roles and responsibilities within that first week or 2 weeks, or even the first month of the school setting. And how can we rearrange some typical tasks at the start of a year in order to allow some periods of times and flexibility. The other thing that we have discussed at all grade spans is the ability to connect to students differently and not necessarily wait for a referral or a student to share a need, but how can we have different means in which they could reach out for assistance needed, whether it be the social unrest just in the nation and the culture, or a reflection of COVID, or a reflection of the remote learning from the spring. And so how can we do that that fits the needs of the student electronically? What other ways can they connect with staff? And then we are looking at all of our SEL lessons that previously were taught and shifting them with some social societal things, as well as the feedback from the support needed coming off of a spring of remote learning. We are providing some professional development for teachers as well in kind of the trauma response in a way. And in some respects, you're gonna have students that are coming that need that response. And in other respects, if we also dwell on something, some other students will be more upset by that. And so how to balance when to talk and problem solve, and who to talk, and how to identify students, because some will be more frustrated and anxious if we dwell on last spring, and some wanna reflect on last spring. And so we're giving staff some professional development on that as well.
Sounds good. I didn't know if the state was going to be offering additional services for that type of thing, or if we could utilize, you know, we have some really good mental health providers in the community that have offered their services in the past, and I didn't know if we could reach out.
I think one of the key questions on the parent survey that I would love all parents to do a family reflection on is the barrier for learning, because we do want to know, is it the anxiety that becomes a barrier for fall learning, or is it you know, our families' philosophical belief in COVID-19 and the way that you interact and get it. And so I think that barrier question will be huge in helping us figure out kind of what are the needs of students and the barriers of students coming back to be ready to learn.
Thank you.
So my question, Ms. Fuchs, was what is the capacity of our buses?
71 passengers and 1 driver.
That's the typical bus?
That's how much it holds. A high school or middle school bus route tends not to have that many because they're too big of kids.
Correct.
I would say our routes average, I don't know, it just depends because we have some routes, you know, out in the country where they're much smaller. But then, for example, where you have a subdivision, say, for example, Blackberry Creek, where they're going to either the middle school or the high school, it's a short distance and we put more kids on those routes. Certainly not over capacity, but more kids. So it just depends.
Okay, so generally you probably have at least 40, 50?
40, 50, yeah.
Okay, so you have like
some that get pretty high, but then when we balance those out that first week of school or two,
right?
Because you've got some high school kids that will drive that we didn't know they were going to drive, or you know, there's lots of little things that happen those first couple of weeks as we tweak the routes. We'll just have to be a little bit more diligent about not initially starting routes too high.
Right. I mean, I just look at the challenge you're having to try to get the students still at school at the appropriate times. And I know we only have just a handful, if that much, extra buses.
Right. We usually have about 5 or 6 extra because you usually have maybe 1 down. Yeah, it's not a lot. So
you may end up needing more drivers just to get everyone.
You know what? We've been looking for drivers. We've posted, and I know that the economy, you know, we've got some unemployment issues, but it takes about, I don't know, 6 weeks to get a driver who doesn't have a license trained with a license. And then we've also got the Department of, or the motor vehicles. They're not taking anybody right now for new licenses. They're only doing those kids. And yeah, so we've got some challenges with regard to our own staff, but we did conduct a survey early on, maybe about 3 weeks ago now, 2 weeks ago, somewhere recent, to find out from our bus drivers, are you able to come back? Are you planning to come back? Are you available during the day? Should we need to add routes? So we've done some surveying to kind of understand what our availability of our drivers really is.
What feedback are you getting?
I've only got 1 right now that is not coming back, and a lot of them are available except for those that have jobs in the middle of the day, which is maybe 2 or 3.
Great, thank you.
Regarding your question, Mr. Rivas, would we potentially see more parents picking up and dropping off too? So that would be another factor as far as the bus utilization and also just the systems that we have in place in front and behind schools to pick up and drop off too. So that's another factor we're going to be gauging and monitoring as we start school.
So I'm assuming if you do decide you need extra bus drivers, that just you'd go ahead and do it and then put it on the July 27th, or am I thinking correctly?
Yeah, bus drivers, usually we hire as many as we can get that we need to cover our routes. So it's a little bit different than what you would see with a staff member in a position. We've generally had I would say a lot more flexibility because, say, for example, you can hire a driver for a route, but they can only do morning. So then you got to hire a person for the afternoon. So it may look like a lot of people, but it's actually just covering routes depending on what everybody's availability is. So definitely you would see the hire come through on the personnel report, but we generally try to figure out the routes and then staff them.
I guess what I was trying to convey and didn't do a good job of it is if you guys need to hire more drivers to make the plan work, that I'm sure I would be supportive of that.
Thank you.
Also, in the past, we've offered a sign-on bonus. I don't know if that's something that would work now. You know, say if you already have your driver's license and that you could qualify for a certain amount of a sign-on bonus, so that they come to us instead of another school district.
Yeah. The board had never taken that away. We've not necessarily used it in the past year or two, but certainly we have that availability. And I will remind our director of transportation as she talks to people, let's talk about that. So thank you for that, Teresa.
Oh, excellent. I didn't realize that it was still on the books. So that's great.
Okay, anything else with this topic?
So back to our staff, I'm sure there will be a handful, if not more, that want to do whatever that needs to do for their health. So we leverage on, I can't even think of the word, the people that fill in. What's the appropriate word for that?
Substitutes?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have we touched base with those individuals and see if potentially their availability, if you will?
We have not yet, but when we do our, when we push out our process to kind of gather that information, it will include all staff. And we would include the substitutes on that. And then after we have our fall learning plan in place, we know what our staff, our certified staff looks like. We then, as we do every year, progress to looking at our substitutes, training them if needed, and then also additional recruitment. Please note too, kind of like bus drivers and food service, substitutes is a rolling application. We have postings up all the time for substitutes, and we're constantly running trainings and trying to fill the roles for subs. So we will be doing that as well, for sure.
Thank you. Or I'll see Todd in one of the classrooms like a previous superintendent did.
Happy to do so.
All right. Well, thank you for all your work, and it will continue. Start again tomorrow morning, right? Or tonight, I guess, for some of this. So J2, if we can move forward, approval of the 2020-21 tentative budget for Fox Valley Career Center.
Yep, I'll turn that right over to Dr. Fuchs and you can get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we're going to be approving the tentative budget for both Fox Valley Career Center and Kaneland School District. So we'll start with Fox Valley Career Center. Let me just remind the board, the reason why the Board of Education approves the Fox Valley Career Center tentative budget is that Kaneland is the administrative agent for Fox Valley Career Center. And so we treat them just like they were a different school, or not a different school, but a school within Kaneland. And the business office, we manage their budget, we pay their bills, we do their payroll, we provide their benefits, they're members of the KEA. And so Fox Valley is one and the same with Kaneland, except for on the budget documents, they are separated. Fox Valley does have its own board of directors comprised of the superintendents of our member districts. And so they have already seen, reviewed, and discussed this tentative budget. This tentative budget does take into consideration all of the enrollment and staffing, supplies, technology, everything that Fox Valley needs in order to conduct their business. They do have a new strategic plan. They primarily get their revenues from tuition. However, they do get some state and federal grants. That information is in your memo. Fox Valley is projecting a higher enrollment for this fall. At this point in time, it's about 100 students more. Remember that a lot of students at Fox Valley do come from Kaneland. And then the Fox Valley budget is always balanced based on that incoming tuition and then the expenditures. This year, the revenues are projected to exceed the expenditures just under $800. Please remember that each fall, Dr. Burchell will true up the prior year and the budget with the actual. And then he does typically return money to each of the member districts based on how many students they had enrolled, and then manages a fund balance in that manner. So are there any questions on the Fox Valley budget? Their total budget, I can tell you, is $2,151,553.21. $2,151,553.21.
Okay, so with no questions, we'll move to a vote. I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the 2020-21 Fox Valley Career Center tentative budget as presented.
So moved, but I had one quick question, just curiosity.
All right, we'll get a second and we'll come back to you. Is there a second? All right, we have a second and Ryan has one question.
Are we the only school board that votes on this because of the board of directors, or, okay, that was it.
All right, any other discussion?
The mentioning of the additional 100 students, we're not at capacity to be able to accept that.
Now, the Fox Valley Career Center uses classrooms at Meredith Middle School next door. They have some classrooms here at the high school, and they have some others over next door. And so between the two areas that they use, they do have capacity for their projected enrollment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move to a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
And Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J3, approval of the 2020-21 tentative budget for Kaneland.
Julianne, I'll let you go ahead with that one too.
Thank you. Tim, can I have the screen then?
That changed it.
Go ahead, Julianne.
Everybody's
Okay.
here.
I'm working on it. All right. Yeah. All righty. So, tonight's tentative budget presentation, we will talk about the following topics in this order. I want to review the budget calendar with you. I'll do that shortly. I want to talk to you about the end of the 2019-2020 budget, which officially ends tomorrow. I want to give you some highlights from 2021. That's the one that starts on July 1. And then the new slides, then I have some budget assumptions that I want to share with you and information. I have a revenue and expenditure summary, the operating fund review summary, and then answer any questions that you might have. With that being said, I want to show you the budget calendar. The Board of Education began discussing the 2021 budget on September 30th, 2019. For those of you who are following along in your binders, that is for the 21-22 budget. So I will send this one out, but you probably don't need this one, because what I want to show you is that we started discussing this in September of 2019, and we've done a lot of things to get us to today. Where we are today is down here near the bottom, where the board will just adopt the tentative budget. During July and August, I will continue to update the budget and assemble the documents. On August 30th, I will give the board an update of the budget. And then on September 14th, we'll have the official required budget hearing and the board adopt the FY21 budget. Following tonight's presentation, we will post the tentative budget on our website, and make sure that all the legal requirements of the budget are taken care of. Are there any questions on the calendar? All righty, let me switch back. Take me just a second. All right, so then let's begin our review of the fiscal year that's about to end. We, in September of 2019, the board adopted a $60.9 million budget. We just finished the year with actual expenditures at about 59.6. The difference between the total and the operating budget would be your bonds, and then also the IMRF and Social Security accounts. So that's why you see two different numbers there. When we talk about the operating budget, I want to remind everybody that I'm speaking of specifically the education fund, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash. That's what comprises the operating budget of the 60.9 ending at 59.6. During 1920, our enrollment decreased just slightly, less than 1%. And these, the salaries listed there at the bottom were the salary increases from the 1819 year to the 1920 year. This past year, 2019-20, we received about 7.1 million in EBF payments. That's about 150,000 more than the prior year. And currently, we are waiting for one final EBF payment. Honestly, I think it'll be here tomorrow, but I'm not sure. But when we get it, it will be 322,000. We are also expecting one more mandated categorical payment. That would be about 900,000. During 1920, we did receive 4 categorical payments, which is what we budget for. We typically budget for 4 payments. But in 1920, one of those 4 payments was from 1819, and 3 of them were for 1920. So that's why they still owe us one more payment. If they give us that payment prior to August 31st, which is within 60 days of the close of the fiscal year, the auditors will accrue that payment, and you will see it show up on the annual financial report or the AFR. If we don't get it and it comes after August 31st, it will get recorded with the 2021 budget. The cash will be recorded in 2021. Cash will be recorded in 2021 either way, unless if it comes tomorrow, which I doubt it. But we did just get 2 payments, one in May and one in June, which were both unexpected, but I was glad to receive them. But the auditors will accrue it back if it comes before August. We are expecting to end this fiscal year with an operating surplus of about 1.4, but it's going to depend on those final receipts of state payments. So in October or November, when you get the annual financial report, we will be able to review what the actual surplus is. This is an estimated surplus based on cash. But when we do all of our fund balance and things like that, we do that based on the AFR because that's the public document that's been audited. We have continued to work with Forecast 5 to update the 5-year long-range plan. And we did use that information to plan for our budget going into the 2021 fiscal year.
Dr. Fuchs?
Yep.
That those 2 payments, are they part of the 1.4 or are they not part of the 1.4?
They're not part of the 1.4 at this time because I don't have them in hand.
Okay, so if we do get them in the next 60 days, our 1.4 could be 2.5?
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm really doubtful that we're going to get the 900. I do highly believe we'll get the 300. But okay. I didn't think we'd get 2 payments in the last 2 months, and I was wrong.
Well, and I know the state does their own thing, and we can't guess. I just wanted to understand where it was going to fall. That's all.
And that's the other thing is that 900, it would be our 5th payment for this year if we get it. and we only budget for 4 because 4 payments is what we're supposed to get. So it would be outside of what we had planned for with our budgets. Because you don't want to budget for 5 payments because when the state catches up, then you'll be short. In 2019, 2020, our actual revenues were 61 million. Right now, we are about just under 200,000 less than budgeted. But if we get that 322,000 payment, we'll be about 100,000 more than budgeted. Actual expenditures, 59 million, 0.6. And that's about 1.3 million less than budgeted. Our estimated addition to the fund balance is 1.4. And as Mr. Carey pointed out, if we get the 322, it'll be about 1.7. And if we get the other 9, it'll be about 2.5-ish. So
Yeah, so I got to apologize. I made a mistake when I asked that question over the weekend. I was looking at the numbers at the end of May 31st, not counting the expenditures of June. So
good.
That's where I had asked something about a 4.8 million surplus. I was wrong. I looked at the wrong piece of paper. So I was looking at the end of May, not the end of June. So that's where that came from.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. That makes me feel better. You will get the June treasurer's report in July. We have to wait to close the month until we get all of our interest income, and we don't get our bank statements till the first of the month after the end of the month is over. So that's why we can't do that reporting for you sooner. So let me talk a little bit, and I kind of already alluded to this, but let me make sure everybody understands. So in 2019, our revenues currently are less than budgeted, but it should end up being about 100,000 more. We are waiting for these 2 payments, the EBF payment and the mandated categorical payment. Anything on revenues with 2019, 2020? Okay. Expenditures. Whoops, go ahead.
That's right, Pedro. The excess, if you will, that's partially attributed to the fact that obviously because we were out all that time, it probably had some savings, if you will. Is that where it's coming from? Some of it.
So, Pedro, this part here is just the revenues. Let me go ahead and switch slides and you'll see what we're talking about with what you're asking. It's the slide here. So in school fund budgeting, you budget for revenues and you budget for expenditures separately. At the end of the year, then you reconcile what are your actual revenues, what are your actual expenditures, and that's how you get to either a surplus or a deficit. So here's the results of the revenue, and here are the results of the expenditures. And if you look at the first line, that is what you're talking about with regard to being out. I've identified them as COVID-19 savings. It's very difficult to quantify. Was that savings directly related to COVID, or was it because we didn't really need it had we been in school? So what I've done on in your binder, pages 14, 15, 16, and 17, I've itemized the things that I believe were mostly COVID related. And please know I may have missed something, but I believe I've got most of them here. And then what I did is once I've identified them as potential COVID impacts, I categorize them into COVID savings, COVID reduced revenues, unexpected expenditures, and other impacts. And so as you go through that report, you can see the various things that were impacted potentially by COVID. So I used 2 methods in which to quantify the potential savings for COVID. The first, it'd be the fourth and fifth column is method 1. The fifth and sixth column is method 2. Again, that's on page 14 in your binder. So in method 1, what I did is I took your expenditure budget and your actual expenditures, and I calculated the difference for each of those categories. Then what I did was I went and looked, well, how much did we spend last year and how much difference was there? So method 2 represents the difference between FY19 and FY20. Some areas you would generally spend about the same. Other areas, each year it gets a little bit more expensive. Sports is one of those examples. Even with the savings, we spent about $8,400 more in FY20 than we did in FY19. But utilities, we spent less. That's the one where I'm saying how much of that less was quantified by COVID and how much was because it maybe was a cooler spring. So that's why you have two numbers. The 62,000 in the utilities is the difference between what we budgeted and what was actually spent. The 25,841 for utilities is the difference between 19 and 20. If you'll turn, well, first of all, these pages were in your packet, so I'll answer any questions you have in a second, but turn to page 17. And what I did on page 17 then is I took method 1 and method 2 and kind of got the totals. Method 1 says we saved about 978,000. Method 2 about 247,000. And then I just took the average of method 1 to method 2 and say COVID savings are probably about $600,000. Again, that's the best way that I could think of to estimate the savings from not being in school from March 16 through the end of the school year. So let me stop for just a minute and ask, does anybody have any questions on the impact of COVID in my chart with regard to the information?
The give back or whatever, the less revenue we'll get for transportation and reimbursement in the next school year compared to last year. Are you thinking that's like 100,000 is just a rough number? So that 600,000, maybe on some level it could be 500,000 because we'll give back some this year, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I won't know that information until probably end of July, first week of August, because I have to do the transportation claim. And I can't do that till after June 30th. And then it takes a little time to gather all the data. If that revenue is less, we don't actually give it back.
Yeah.
You
get less. But if you were saying the savings is like 150 to 175,000, it's like half 75%-ish, right?
That's right. That's
so 100,000. Okay.
And I would say I agree. Okay. But that savings is in special ed, a lot of it. Well, the second page, oh, there it is. That 166,000 is the one in transportation. Special ed gets a little bit higher reimbursement at 80%. And then the other one is regular ed. There's two line items for the reimbursements for transportation. One is for regular education, the other is for special ed, and they're calculated differently and separately.
So that special ed line, it said state mandated payments to private placement contractors. That would include transportation?
Yes, that's all. That number is all transportation. And actually,
gotcha. I thought it was more, so that makes more sense. So there'll be, okay, that helps me understand.
Great. Are there other questions on the COVID impact? This is hopefully a one-time kind of addition to your tentative budget, but I know it's important because the numbers are significant.
All right, for the page 16, the unemployment, insurance. I'm just curious how that process works. So substitute teachers are considered full-time employees and then can apply for unemployment. I thought there was something the governor said that, so I guess I'm just looking for a bigger explanation.
So great question. Up until recently, and I don't have the House bill number or Senate bill number, substitute teachers were not eligible for unemployment during the summer. We would send them a letter and they had a reassured employment and they didn't get it. However, the governor did sign a new act that said that they might be eligible, and then he's listed several pieces of criteria. At this point, I don't know how many are going to be approved. They really haven't started processing and sending us information yet. All we're getting are the claim applications, and then we have to send back the salary and the number of days they worked. Some of these people may have other jobs where they've been furloughed that would qualify them for unemployment, where Kaneland may not be responsible for it. So at this point, I do not have a lot of information on unemployment other than we're watching it, we're learning. I keep participating in webinars that there's just not a lot of information yet.
And the long-term effect of that would be, we would see the worst case scenario is we see an increase in our unemployment insurance costs.
Yes.
Okay. So I appreciate all this.
Yeah, but hopefully these people will go back to work and it will be short-term.
All right. So all of this, regardless of which method, is helpful information to us, but none of this is in part of the 2021 budget, right?
No, none of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is all still 1920.
Okay.
I just finish up the year and keeping the board informed.
Right. I just wanted to make it clear that while this is helpful and good, we didn't put $600,000 worth of savings into the next year's budget thinking that it was gonna, that's all I was clarifying.
Perfect.
Julianne, could you put something around the fact that we were only there half a year and we still spent more on sports than the year before? Did I read that right? Did I hear you right?
Yeah. That primarily has to do with stipends being increased because they go up each year.
We didn't pay the stipends for did we pay stipends for?
We paid stipends. We were mandated to do so.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yep. We were mandated to pay stipends in the spring, even though we didn't have spring sports and activities, both at the middle school and the high school levels.
When you say mandated, that came down from the state?
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the governor.
So we were in a path to overspend like crazy then.
No.
Just because we didn't receive the fees for the students. Is that what it was?
Look at method one.
Mm-hmm.
You were under budget by $92,000. We budgeted for the increased expenditures. We budgeted for the increased expenditures, and so we were under budget in sports by $92,000. But method two says, well, how much did we spend last year? And that's where we spent a little bit more.
All right, thank you.
To Pedro's other question, is the last line include sports? Maybe the last line? I've lost it now. One of these lines. When it talked about refunds, was sports included in that 100,000 or something?
So that would be on page 15 at the bottom, student fees.
Did that include sports? Yeah, athletics.
Yes and no. It included some. So some of the sports had already been paid, but some of them had not. So we reimbursed any sport fee that had been paid up until that point for spring.
But it's a separate line than the other athletics line.
that would be a revenue. Not, yes. So it's not on the expenditure side, that's on the revenue side. Look at the, I got the category up there, reduced revenues.
Yeah. But I think Pedro had asked if some of that was because we didn't get spring fees.
Oh, okay, I'm
And
sorry.
it's kind of in two separate lines. So the answer is yes, even though that didn't really impact that line on the chart.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you, ma'am.
Anything else on COVID at this time? Okay, let me move on. I'm going to direct your attention back to the screen for just a moment. So oftentimes you want to know, well, where did the money, where was it underspent and what's going on? So with that being said, hang on one second, there we go. I divided it up into the three funds, the operating funds, education, O&M, and transportation. I got your budgeted amount, your actual amount, and these are expenditures, and then how much it was underspent. Please remember for the 2019-2020 budget, each of those funds actually had predicted or estimated a small budget surplus. And so in order to calculate the actual percent underspent, I took the amount underspent minus the estimated surplus, and then I got a percent. So you can see that the education fund, while it is 658,000 underspent, it was about 1.3%. And then if you use the average of the 600,000, a lot of that was from the education fund, but also a lot of it was from transportation. With regard to O&M, you're about 1.4% underspent, and transportation was the highest at 7.1. And again, that's those lines on page 14, the 166 and the 174. That's a lot of that money.
Page 14 of the actual budget.
Of the COVID report.
Okay.
Yep.
So for education, we'd add the 658 plus the 34 to get what the estimated surplus in that fund.
Subtract it. We predicted at the beginning of the year that there'd be about $34,000 left. So I would not consider that to be underspent because we expected it.
Well, all right, let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
So if I wanted to look at the growth in the fund balance of education, I would add the 658 plus the 34 to get the expected growth in the fund.
You could do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm ready to move on and leave 2019-20 and move forward to 2020-2021 for tonight's tentative budget. Anything else on 2019-2020 before I do so? In your binder, pages 11, 12, and 13 are really good pages for 2019-2020 information.
11, 12.
Pages 11, 12, and 13. Okay. It has all of your funds at the top and then your operating funds at the bottom. All right, here we go. 2020, 2021. Tonight, I'd like to ask the board to please adopt a $63.3 million tentative operating budget with the total tentative budget at $77.2 million. This operating budget is about $2.4 million more than last year, or 3.9%. The money will be used for salary increases, new personnel, additional capital projects, and additional money for Fox Valley tuition. We have an estimated deficit of about 1 million in the ed fund, about 117 deficit in the O&M, and then the transportation fund is showing a surplus of about 228,000. Remember, a part of this is a function of having to do the levy in December and then shifting money to try to balance the different expenditure needs predicted for the following year. So it's yep, go ahead.
I'm remembering something from when I first came on the board. The law change, or did the rules, or what, didn't we not used to be able to transfer from one fund to the other, or was there some rigmarole we had to go through? Is there more freedom to do that now?
There's no more freedom. It would take the exact same process from before. And with these operating funds, as of right now, you can still move money around, but it does take board action and a public hearing. And we've only done that once in the past 11 years. And that's when we moved a large chunk of money from transportation to education.
Did the levy request change a little bit?
Yes, it did.
I think that's what you're thinking, Ryan.
Yep. We are now able to levy more in the education fund where we need it. Whereas before it was restricted at $4. Now we can move it. We're not moving it. We're levying for it on the front end as close as we can in the right places.
Okay, that's what all right, yeah, I remember there was we were limited by what we could levy. All right, yeah, all right, thank you.
Yep. So right now we are showing a deficit of about 774,000. I would say that this deficit is probably caused by the unexpected and unusually high increase in our health insurance. 2 unexpected capital projects, although one was paid in 1920, I'll tell you that in a minute. And then I've budgeted a higher amount in Fox Valley tuition because of the higher enrollment. And we paid more last year. I want to make sure we have a little bit more money in that line item so that if we do have more kids, which we're expected to, that we have enough money for tuition.
Can I point out one other thing is when you say projected deficit of 774,000, that seems like a lot of money. But when you divide that as a percentage of the budget, we're off by 1.2%.
Yeah.
It makes it feel better to me anyway.
Yeah. And honestly, what I mentioned to President Sparber is I'm hopeful that we end closer to balanced. But at this point in the process, and I told Dr. Layden this too, I can't find anything else to reduce or any other revenues to add to bring it more in line without being concerned. Now, please know throughout the summer, I will learn information from the state of Illinois that will confirm some of the information. As I learn it, I'll update the tentative budget, which then will lead into September, which is the final budget. I'm hopeful to contain this deficit for the final budget or ideally lower it, but I don't want to make promises that I can't keep yet.
Right, and we're talking about 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge deal.
Right. Thank you. All right, so we're looking at operating revenues at about 62.6. About 1.6 million more than last year, and I'll break that down in just a moment. The expenditures at about 63.3, which is about 3.7 more than what was spent this year, and that's a pretty big increase. And that's what makes me think there's something in there that maybe could be shifted, but I can't identify it at this point. Please remember that, and I'll remind you shortly, salaries and benefits make up a significant portion of our budget. We keep a very detailed spreadsheet of all salaries, all positions, in order to get the numbers into the system for the budget. And so at this point, we have put in there what we think we're having. We do have salary increases this year. Speak is 1.9, and all these increases are built into that budgeted number. KEA is approximately 3.37. Non-speak and staff and administration is approximately 3%. That information is right out of your budget binder, just so that if you want to review it, you can. That is on page 5 of your budget binder, these budget highlights. So with regard to revenues, revenues are typically, oh, by the way, this slide, slides 11, 12, and 13 are new slides that I'm hopeful will be helpful to the board to be reminded what we've all agreed to and what goes into the tentative budget. So I'd appreciate any feedback on these next 3 slides to know if it met that goal of being helpful to the board. Revenues are broken down into 3 parts: local, state, and federal. We know that the tax levy is bringing in approximately 1.4 million more. We know that the state money, we believe that no new tier money will be available in 2021. But again, I'm not positive of that, so I kept that state money the same. Our mandated categoricals, at this time, I kept them the same, but I do know that once I do the transportation claim, I'll be able to reduce it as needed for the revenue. But right now, I don't know what that is. And so I put in there what this year's. And then the federal revenues are also projected the same. We've received some of our federal grant title amounts, but some of the other federal ones we haven't received yet. So the ones that we know, they're in there with the known amount. The ones that we don't know, we put in the 1920, and then once we learn about them this summer when they tell us, then we update the budget so that when you get the final budget, it has the actual amounts. On the expenditure side, we've done salary increases for that. That was approximately $841,000 more than last year. And of that, about $224,000 is for new positions. The new positions include a personalized learning coordinator, a special ed teacher at the high school, and then miscellaneous sections at the high school. At this point, I also want to note that it also includes a potential second grade teacher at Blackberry Creek. I didn't put that in here because it's not been approved yet, but if it gets approved tonight, it's in the tentative budget. It includes the health insurance increase, which is about 1.2 million more than last year, about 700,000 more than what was projected. That's probably my biggest hit. Hopefully that'll balance itself out next year, and we'll move back into the right direction. It really is an unusual increase that we've not seen. Curriculum, 400,000 for the adoption of new materials, and that's the same amount as in 1920.
I have a question. I'm not sure if now or when we get to the additional staffing requests. I honestly believe we're going to end up going back to remote learning because there's going to be a spike in COVID. Does the administration want to request additional staff to deal with learning remote, teaching teachers to do remote learning? I feel like if any time we need to spend part of our surplus, now is the time to get it done so that we can correctly staff. And I don't know what's going to happen. Like, you guys still have a plan to make up and there's plan B for later on, but is now the time to talk about more teachers, more staffing, more computers? I don't know what the right question even is.
No, I appreciate the forward thinking on that one, Mr. Carey. But what I think what we'll do is we put together the recommended plan for the next meeting. We will then also at the same time see if there will be estimated ancillary costs that we want to account for.
Okay, because yeah, if there's ever a year where we need a few extra bodies, I think this might be the year.
Yes, thank you.
Additionally, this tentative budget includes the technology that we talked about, just a hair more than last year. That has to do with some of the COVID related things for that are listed in the report. And then just a little bit more for, what was it? The Chromebooks for the fourth graders too. So those are in there, the incoming fourth graders. School buses, we've talked about at length. Those are in there. Capital projects are in there. One thing I wanted to mention to all of you, the KHS intercom is almost done being installed. And so that money was actually paid for in 1920. There was enough money in the capital, so I did pay for that. Additionally, we talked about this at the meeting where we approved the chillers. I ended up paying $167,000 out of 1920, and then we owe a little over $500,000 for 2021, which is in the budget. The 167 represents the chillers, the equipment, and then the rest of it is the installation and some of the other stuff that goes with it. The company helped us to divide what portion should be in 1920, what portion should be in 2021. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. Fox Valley tuition line item is $700,000. That is $130,000 more than in 1920. Again, that is to cover us for the additional tuition. By the time we get to September, I'll know, because Dr. Burchell this summer will figure out our refunds for 1920. We'll have a better idea of how many kids actually stay in Fox Valley. So I may be able to adjust that line item. But for now, I felt the need that we should probably cover ourselves. All right, those were the three new slides. This next slide is something that you're used to seeing. Our local revenues make up about 80%. Property taxes are about 75 of that 80. Our evidence-based funding and mandated categoricals about 18%, and federal revenues about 2%.
Have you heard any more about if we're going to be receiving the local tax payments on time, or if that's going to be delayed because of COVID?
I am so glad you asked that question because I forgot to mention that. As of right now, we are on schedule for our June payments. So we typically get a small payment in May and a fairly large one in June. I just got this morning, DeKalb County came in. Prior to that, Kane County had come in. Both counties are showing receipts a little bit higher than last year at this time. So right now, I'm not concerned for that June payment. DeKalb County gave a 90-day where they wouldn't charge you a fee if you paid late. Kane County only did 30 days. And that was, from my understanding, only for the June payment. From my understanding, as of right now, the September payment should be coming in on time. If something changes, I'll be sure to let you know. But as of right now, the receipts of our taxes appear to be on schedule.
That's good.
Our expenditure summary, you can look at expenditures in a couple different ways. The first way is by function. There's a second chart in your binder under expenditures. That would be on page 46. But I do want to make sure that you know that 52% is spent on instruction and another 43% on instructional support for a combined 90% of 95% of our operating expenditures. So I think that that's very good. Please know when I say support, that means your administrative support, your technical support, logistical support, and anything that helps to facilitate and enhance instruction. Here's the operating fund summaries. You can see the Ed Fund, Transportation Fund, and Operations and Maintenance Fund. And you can see the various highlights of each fund. I wanted to make sure that you saw this. I made one typo. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, your copies say that it's a projected surplus. The O&M is actually a projected deficit. So please scratch that off and write that in for me. I apologize for that. But we've been through the majority of this information through the rest of the presentation. So I think at this time, what I'd like to do is find out what questions board members have, because I know it is getting late and we have a couple other topics.
Any questions? I know we were asking some as we went. Pedro?
I got one on the revenue side. Is there any talks about having to deal with COVID, additional potential expenses we have to go through that at the state or the federal level may be providing?
Yes. At the state level, currently, we've got the CARES Act, and we applied for a grant for $153,000. Right now, that's not in the tentative budget, but it will zero out because we'll put $153,000 in the revenue and the $153,000 in expenditures. We are expecting to spend a majority of that on the teacher training for not remote learning, but COVID kind of training that Dr. Mum talked about.
The PD and the PD potentially for if we go with the blended model too.
Yep. And then we put some money in there for the PPE. We put some money in there for summer school, just a little bit, not much. And so anyway, so yes, we do believe, or we have been approved for that 153,000. I'll have that in the final budget. We didn't have it for the tentative. We've been working on that grant and had to go through the approval process.
Any other questions? No? All right, we'll move to a vote. I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the 2020-21 Kaneland tentative budget as presented.
So moved. This is Meg.
In a second?
Second, this is
And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
and Mr. Lawler.
aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J4, approval of additional FTE for Blackberry.
Yep. As you know, we board approved staffing plan every March, and then we continue as we get into the summer, monitor through the principals, through the administrative assistants in each of the buildings, and then through HR, monitor staffing, monitor student enrollment. And so, as you know, there will be once or twice, potentially a summer, where we'll bring a request to the board. And at that time, we make that request and then also provide any other updates on hotspots or other enrollment areas that we might want to look out for the remainder of the summer. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Adkins, and Chris, you can talk us through this request.
Thank you. So as the board may recall, back in March at our minimum staffing plan, we highlighted two sections that were of concern to us that we wanted to make sure we monitored. One was the second grade at KBK, the other was the first grade at John Stewart. Since then, we've had enough students register in the second grade at KBK to justify an additional FTE. We now have 81 students there, so the additional teacher would bring us to class sizes of 20. Without that teacher, we would be at class sizes of 27 to 1 which we do not want to have, obviously, at early elementary grade level. So thank you. Also, I'll take a quick moment to note the amended agenda tonight was for that personnel report. We did, in anticipation of this approval and presenting this to the board tonight, progress with some of our interviewing processes, and we do have a preferred candidate identified, but pending the approval of this presentation. So as Dr. Lade mentioned, we are still watching that first grade at Stewart. Additionally, we are watching the first grade at Shields, but please know that those 2 grade levels would need between 8 and 9 at Stewart and 11 and 12 students at Shields. And historically, we do anticipate getting additional students, but I would doubt that we would get that many between now and the start of the year. So although we're watching them, they're not anywhere near the 27-to-1 level that Blackberry got to without this additional FTE. So
any questions?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, we're just asking that the board approve additional FTE for the second grade at Blackberry Creek.
No questions. Okay, so we'll move on to the vote. I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the addition of a 1.0 FTE teacher to second grade at Kaneland Blackberry Creek Elementary School for the 2020-21 school year.
So moved. Ryan.
In a second?
I'll second it.
And a roll call.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Farber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
and Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J5, follow-up discussion of high deductible health plan, health savings account.
So I would like to note or share with you that as we were having additional dialogue, Stephen Morkos from Hub International has joined us. So you may hear or see a new voice or a picture, and he has joined us, and so has Maureen Lemon. So we do have 2 additional participants for the meeting. And in the memo, as you saw, this is a follow-up conversation that the board had initially on May 11th, and then is going to was then tabled at the following meeting. So this is our follow-up conversation for that. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, and she can either reintroduce Stephen and Deb, and they can go ahead and share the information that's part of our presentation.
Alrighty. What I'd like to do is ask Tim to allow me to share my screen, please. Thank you. Alrighty. So on the May 11th board meeting, we did talk about the addition of a high deductible health plan option for Kaneland employees. The board had some follow-up questions that we wanted to investigate. We had planned to do this at the end of May, but we learned that we may not be doing things according to some of our collective bargaining agreements. So we've been working with Maureen Lemon to make sure that the information that we share with the board is appropriate for and in line with the high deductible health plan and our collective bargaining agreements. We will be presenting the information to the board tonight, and the board will have an opportunity to ask questions about the information in the presentation. And then I do believe that there is a closed session scheduled to discuss any potential collective bargaining issues if necessary. With that, Stephen and Deb, please go ahead, and I can start you on the first slide. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Julianne. I think Deb is joined, right? Can you see Deb here?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, everyone, and appreciate, nice seeing everyone again. Appreciate you taking some more time to listen to our, continued topic of this HSA discussion and high deductible health plan discussion. So as Julianne mentioned, we, obviously, I think all of you may remember the last time we presented to you, which was on May 11th, there were several questions. I think there were 6 questions that the board had asked or that came up either during that meeting or subsequent to that meeting. So what we've done tonight is tried to, answer those questions here in this presentation. So I think the first slide, speaks to the first question, which was, is it possible to split the savings between the Board of Education and the employees? And the answer to that is yes, that is possible. And we listed the 3 ways that you can do that here. The first way is by decreasing the employee contributions of the high deductible health plan. Second way is increasing the funding to the health savings account. If you recall, we talked about funding seed money, or potentially the board potentially funding seed money to the health savings account. So you could do that and increase the amount in that contribution, or you can make plan enhancements. And we've, talked about at the last meeting pharmacy costs, but there are other plan enhancements that you could do, which would reduce the out-of-pocket costs at the to the employees at time of treatment and service. And those are the 3 ways that we can share the savings with employees. And just stop me, by the way, if you have any questions. The second slide, the second question that came up was the board had asked if there were additional examples that we could share to decrease employee contributions and make a shift to make a shift from the PPO to the high deductible plan more attractive. And what we're simply pointing out here in this slide is that the current contribution structure is listed here on this slide. You have 2 different categories of eligible employees. You have on the left the all teachers, KEA, that are 12-month educational support personnel, speak and non-speak, and you can see directly below that the board contribution for somebody that is single or takes single coverage, I should say, the board pays 95%, and any employees that take dependent, any of the other 3 tiers, which include dependent coverage, the board pays 75% of the dependent coverage for that class of employee, that group of employees. To the right is the other group of employees, which are the educational support personnel, work minimum of 6 hours a day. For that group, the board pays 95% of the single contribution and 50% of any dependents that are participating on the plan. And so we're just pointing out here in this slide that that's the pricing that we're using as for illustrative purposes, because that's the structure that currently exists. And then this next slide it outlines exactly what that looks like. And I think we decided to put this slide in here. Use mine, it's a little easier. Because there were some questions that came up, and I think this will help. Number one, it'll illustrate, I think, more clearly to the board what the contributions are for the current PPO plan and what they would be if we were to institute a high deductible plan. And you can see on the left, you've got the PPO, the 2 categories at the top and the bottom there represent the 2 categories I just pointed to in the last slide. You can see the total cost, which are the same under the PPO, of course, but you can see that the contribution structures are different. So the district costs are greater on the top tier, as we pointed out a minute ago. And you can see to the right of that, the employee contributions. And if you follow that same contribution structure for the high deductible health plan, you will see how we come up with the district cost and the employee cost to the right there. And then to the far right are the monthly savings for the district and the monthly savings for employees. So we thought this slide would help illustrate and exactly what we were talking about when we came up with these contributions, and it also, or exactly what would illustrate those contributions we just pointed to in the prior slide. We also just, again, this is just for illustrative purposes because we've talked about 5% migration as sort of an expectation. We illustrate what that would look like and how many people that would be over here on the high deductible health plan. Obviously, we haven't shown totals. If we had that migration, not in this slide, but you can see we just point out that those are the number of employees that would migrate from each class and each tier if we had 5% migration. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other thing I'm going to just point out, and by the way, I watched, done this now enough times to know I can't. I have a tendency to want to point to the screen, and I'm going to try not to do that because I watched some of these videos and realized that's not very fair to the viewer. But if you look at the total, what we call total premium in this slide, it's really the premium. Thank you, Julian. It's really the premium expected funding amount. So if we get, or what we call premium equivalent, and as long as we're funding each category, each tier in each plan to those numbers, to those what we call here total premium, then you will not have a problem with a shortfall in the funding. We wouldn't expect you to have a problem. Now, we obviously have experienced this year, our projections and Blue Cross projections were off, but and because we're self-funded, we don't know with an absolute certainty, but we make our best educated guess, and those total premiums represent the best educated guess. So as long as we're funding the plan to each category to those total premiums listed here, then we won't have a funding problem. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to pass this slide, these next two slides over to Deb, since she did the legwork on the question regarding prescription drugs.
Yeah, I think at the last board meeting that we attended, Steve and myself, that was maybe back in May, the question was brought up on what we could do with the pharmacy in order to make it a little bit more attractive to employees that might enroll in a high deductible health plan. So our options here for the high deductible health plan is to completely waive the deductible for any of the drugs on the preventive drug list. And I believe that was provided to you separately by Julianne. The second option is to waive the deductible for generic drugs only. And again, the generics on the preventive drug list. And then an option to waive deductibles for all drugs on the preventive drug list, both brand and generic. And so if you move to the next slide, we kind of show you what that would cost the district if you were to add that into the high deductible health plan option. So waiving all drugs on the preventive drug list and have the co-insurance still apply would add about $16.43 to each premium tier that we just saw in the 2 slides ago. So each premium tier, it would add $16.43 per employee per month. And then to waive just the generic drugs, those on the preventive drug list, you can see this option would add $6.90 to each premium tier. And that would be a monthly amount. Does anybody have any questions on that? Obviously, because you are waiving deductibles for those people taking those drugs off the preventive list, it adds dollars to the cost of the plan. And these are just estimated too. So it's all dependent on utilization. And so, just working with the underwriters and Blue Cross Blue Shield, these are the estimates that we came up with.
Great, thank you, Deb. Any questions on those pharmacy slides that we just presented? Great, thank you. So this next slide is just simple math. I think the question the board wanted to see some, just wanted us to illustrate what the cost would be if we increase the seed amounts that we talked about it at the May 11th meeting. We used the $500 for single and $1,000 for really anybody with dependents, family or anyone with dependents, as a benchmark for seed money. And of course, that's illustrated there on the left. If we had 5% migration in those categories, the amount that the district would contribute to these 5%, this 5% of the population will be $20,000. And we're just showing here a couple examples of different, if we were to increase the seed money, for example, in the middle, from 500 to 650 for single and from 1,000 to 1,300, using the same migration, it goes up to 26. Of course, the more we contribute, the more the board, I should say, contributes, the greater the cost to the district would be. And of course, it all is dependent on, we're just illustrating 5% here. If you have more than 5%, that cost is going to go up. If you have less than 5%, that cost is going to go down. However, it's important to note, if you paid attention to the premium contributions and the savings on slide 4, if we have an increase in migration, you'll see a greater savings to the district and to the employees. So that helps offset these increased contributions. Any questions on that? Okay, this next slide, I said this earlier on slide 4, but I'll repeat it because it did come up, and I realized there was some confusion around this, and I know exactly where that, who was responsible for that. That was me, frankly. And looking back at that, the way that exchange and interaction occurred. But to make it perfectly clear, and that's why we wanted to illustrate on slide 4, the actual fully, full projections, what the actual total cost would be, as long as we fund that to the projected amount listed on slide 4. Doesn't matter if more people migrate or less people migrate to the high deductible plan. The fund will be, the plan will be properly funded. And then I think that was the end. If anybody has any questions on that, those were the 6 questions that were posed to us either at that meeting or after the meeting. So I think what we're simply saying here in this last slide, 2 things. Number one is we really tried to do this when we met on May 11th, was to say that in our opinion, we really wanted to cast a wider net. And so, the 3 kind of examples we gave in the very first question, how do we create savings and attract people or motivate people to come to this plan? And our belief is that we do a little bit of each one of those things. Maybe if you really want to be effective, maybe if we can take a slice of each one of those to cast a wider net. And that's simply because we don't know what everybody's personal situation is. And, to some, more contributions to the HSA might be attractive, to some lower premium contributions, and to others, richer benefits. So that's all we're saying in this first statement. And the last, the bottom portion of this slide is just a cost analysis. And I think here you can see if you looked at the renewal, went back to the original renewal that the board saw based on the population of 490 people, you've got a total spend of about $10,081,000. 8.3 million of that, a little more than 8.3 is the district's contribution. 1.758 is employee contribution. If we were to, implement a high deductible health plan and we had 5% migration, that number comes down to $9,969,000. So about a total savings of about $111,000 under the current contribution structure. almost 92,000 that goes to the district, and just under 20,000 goes to the employee.
Does anyone have any questions? No? All right. Thank you for your late night visit with us.
You're welcome.
I guess at least it's at home this time. So are we ready to move on to the superintendent report? I think we are.
Yeah.
All right, Todd.
So go ahead. Our first topic, over the last month, over the last month, we've seen a couple districts in our area share either a set board statement or something from administration regarding Black Lives Matter and racial equality. And during that time, as I considered some communication, we were fortunate to have a number of students who shared with some of their teachers a request to meet, a request to talk. And so over the last 3 weeks, we did meet with 5 or 6 teachers, a couple administrators, and 5 or 6 students to preliminarily meet to talk about some of their needs, some of their thoughts and questions. And so at the same time as some of those meetings were going on, one of our board members, Mrs. Witt, who I'll turn it over to in a second, did have a request to talk a little bit about a board resolution. What would that look like? How could we communicate that? And so I did talk with Maureen Lemon, who's here tonight with us, to a little bit of a board resolution. How can we do that? What would that look like? And boards are free to create resolutions, have contact with that, or have conversation regarding that to see if there's something that they would like to do on various topics. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Witt. And Teresa, please feel free to share some of your thoughts and kind of how you generated that idea.
Okay, so I think, you know, there's a need right now for people to speak up, whether regardless of, you know, in what forum or what group. And as a, you know, as a governmental body for, you know, a very large school district that contains diversity, I just really feel that it's important that we stand behind our staff and students of color, and that we let them know that we also believe that Black Lives Matter. And the best way I thought to do that was to do a board resolution. And I did look around, and they're, you know, it's all over the place how they're worded and things like that. But I think Todd and Maureen probably came up with something. Maybe they could come up with something pretty good. So, and I know it can be politicized, but that's not the intent here. The intent is just to stand behind our students and our staff, members of color. So I think it's really important, and I hope other people are supportive.
I don't disagree with the thing that you said, but I think this is getting way too close to having a political opinion on something, and we have avoided that at all costs in the past. There was the Me Too movement that we didn't do anything to support. There's been other movements in the past that we haven't. There will be ones in the future, and I don't think we want to go down this road.
I think we can't avoid it. We can't not go down this road. There's a difference in this movement. There's an urgency. There are lives at stake. There are people dying. I'm not saying that the other things were not important. And perhaps we were wrong, and maybe we should have taken a stand at that time. I think this has gone beyond political opinion. There's a need, there's a problem, and I just don't think it's political at this point.
having not been on the board in the past, I won't comment on past decisions to participate or not, but I would agree with Teresa that this is to not stay anything is to take a stance, and that is not a stance that I want to be on.
Okay, let's carry this further. It could be what's the next issue? Where do we draw the line on what we comment on and what we don't? Because we've never gone down this road before.
We'll make that decision when we come to it. I mean, we have taken stands on certain things. We've stood behind our LGBTQ plus students in the past, not with a resolution, but we certainly have done it with, policy. And
You're right, and I'm not saying that
get to go down the slippery slope argument path at the.
I'm sorry, you broke up at the end of that, Teresa.
I said, I don't think the slippery slope argument is appropriate for this.
Well, I disagree. And I think this is a political issue. I'm not saying that, I'm not commenting on the merits of it in any way, but it's a political football that I don't think we should be involved in.
Yeah, and I tend to think this issue is less political. I hear what you're saying, Ryan, but I definitely would feel comfortable with the board having a resolution in this area, and maybe to consider policy, other actions that would kind of be behind a resolution, which I think we have anyways, but maybe they should be rethought again at this point. Any other? I see Aaron going on, off, on, off,
Aaron
on,
like
off.
can't decide.
And
now?
There we go. We're waiting for you.
Something. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Are you there, Aaron?
Did he go out again?
He said he was having power and connection issues earlier.
And I think we've lost Aaron. So we'll give him a second maybe to get back. I think he did have comment on this, but I don't know if anyone else has a thought they want to raise. Todd, is there anything that you're able to share as far as your conversations went with the people you talked to, or was that not something to be shared?
Yeah, it was, they were wide open, and they were glad to have the conversation. I think their questions or the concerns were just raised that thankfully what the students had shared was that there were no direct attacks, very little of direct name calling, bigotry, those kinds of things. More of a concern of more of understanding of varied backgrounds, experiences, and wanting to let staff and their peers of students of color learn just a greater awareness of socio-geographic, socio-economic, just issues and concerns that they could share and help our staff and students understand what students of color, especially specifically in this instance, Black students, are dealing with on a daily basis. As far as official plans, we've not had any conversations about the fall or what we would do or any of those types of things. I think those are bigger picture, bigger planning type conversations and organizational movements that would need to take place.
And Aaron, are you back?
Yeah, I'm assuming you guys heard nothing I said.
Absolutely nothing.
Awesome, because it was so much better than that first. All right, so I'll just piggyback on what people were saying, that I don't think this is necessarily a political idea. I think this is something about supporting our students, especially our students that are in vulnerable populations. We, as a board, have a duty to support them. So I think we should make some kind of statement.
All right, any other thoughts?
I'd be curious to hear what Pedro has to say if he's there.
I get myself in trouble
Well,
because of the fact that I believe what's going on as far as supporting what have you and such. I'm just going to leave it at diversity altogether.
I didn't hear what he said at the end. I'm sorry. You're
So I'm going to leave it at diversity, supporting diversity.
Oh, okay.
So does the board, or I don't know if Teresa has thought about this a bit too, about giving, I assume, Dr. Layden direction in a certain way?
I'm not exactly sure how it would look. The resolutions are written in a certain way so that I don't know if we need Maureen's help in doing that. I mean, it's just a bunch of whereases and then be it resolved that. So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't thinking that the board, you know, what I don't want is I don't think it's appropriate for the board, 7 members, you know, all of us to get together and say, well, I want it to say this and I want whereas this and I want whereas this. And well, I don't want the resolution to say that. I think, you know, there are probably some examples out there that are appropriate and that would work. And that, you know, if you brought it to us and then anybody who doesn't like it doesn't have to vote for it.
Hi, everyone. Yes, the Illinois Association of School Boards and ISB have put out a draft resolution that we certainly can start there. And Dr. Layden and I can look at that and see if there's anything we think needs to be changed before it comes to you.
I just want to make sure that we don't put something out and then not also take actions that show our commitment to this. I don't want to be an institution that just has words and no follow-up. So if we're not also going to take steps this fall to make sure that we're checking systematic racism and we're supporting our students of color and any of our marginalized students, then we should not do this.
We shouldn't be doing a resolution. That should be a policy issue, because if you want, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but having a resolution doesn't accomplish anything. And unless there's policy behind it.
It's to the students of color and the staff of color that we're supportive, and it also gives backing and support to what the administration might want to do, and anything that we might want to do in policy. It gives it more backing and meaning.
Go ahead, Erin.
Go. You.
I was just saying we don't need to write policy into this resolution. I just want to make sure that as a school district, with our administration, with our teachers, that we are also going to take further steps beyond just these words.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that 100%, Meg. I think that, and I think, Teresa, you said it too, right? Like, saying it gives it maybe some teeth. So if we need to do something later, we've got this as our backing. But I would also argue that we have a voice, right? Like, the school board is a powerful voice in the community, and to not take this moment and use that voice on behalf of our students, I think is wrong, right? So I think we can, even just saying this is the right step in the right direction. Now, of course, I think we have to have that follow through, but we have to start with that. We have this powerful voice. We should speak for those who maybe don't have that kind of platform.
It's well said.
So Todd, it sounds like, do you have what you need to start with a resolution, and then maybe the board would like, I don't know if that's a topic for future discussion or just how you'll bring it back. There's maybe some other thoughts in this arena.
Yes, I have the direction that I need, and I can talk through that and bring information back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next topic I have, on November 3rd, as you saw in the weekly update, November 3rd is now a state holiday, and therefore our calendar that we have submitted, which has already been approved for the year, the ROE right now has said that based on some ongoing conversation that they might be having as far as potential waivers or no waivers, that we should hold tight for right now and not make a formal decision as a board to shift our calendar yet. So we should wait at least a meeting into July just to wait to see if indeed there will be a chance for a waiver or any other changes, calendar changes or anything to do, or if it's truly just making November 3rd a holiday and then adding a day at the end of the school year. It could be that simple, but the superintendent, regional office of education superintendent said we should hold for now. So that's more of an update than anything else.
Going back to the last one, it's very clear that there were some people that are supportive. Did we have 4?
I thought we did, but it's fair to ask. I think was it
Anna and me.
And I wasn't. Yeah, I think we had 4.
Okay, I'm missing someone in my mental calculations. But
I mean, as a me, Meg, Aaron, and Teresa was 4, I think.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, good to ask. I know we probably could have seen thumbs in this visual.
No, we didn't take an official straw poll, but I counting those.
Go ahead, Ted.
Okay, I counted wrong. That's fine.
So then the calendar one will provide, and then the last thing, as you know, with phase 4 is we're having the conversation with students coming back to school in the fall, and in groups of 50. Our July 27th board meeting, I also shared an update that wanted to confirm with the board that, and I think Maureen might have some legal feedback on this too, but that we can move forward with our next scheduled regular board meeting on July 27th to have that back in person, practicing the same social distancing measures that our students and staff members will be practicing at school. So I just wanted to see if there was any feedback or thoughts on that before we finalize that back on site for the July 27th.
Is that including masks?
Yes, mask or shield.
Yes. And I don't know if you want to consider, well, where your normal boardroom at Harder should be large enough. Yes. You don't need to move it to an auditorium. Not that you'd have 50 people, but in case you have 50 people, can they be in that room reasonably well socially distancing? Or should it be perhaps in an auditorium or in the cafeteria there?
What we've done is, that's a good question, Maureen. What we've done is transition to the cafetorium there at Harder when and if we found out more people would be attending. So what we do is after we transition or have this conversation, we can take a look at the 6th grade team room. We can space out the tables and then the chairs for attendees to see about how many attendees we might be able to accommodate, then either keep that site or shift it possibly to the cafetorium.
I would also say, I mean, I know it's different for classrooms in general as they're looking at this plan, but as we look at events and gatherings like this, the guidance isn't just 50, it's 50% or 50, whatever is less.
Can you say that again, Meg?
So when you're doing gatherings in rooms for events like this, not just classes, because that's a different set of guidance, the rule is 50% of capacity or 50 people, whatever is less. So if your room only holds 60 capacity, we keep 50, it has to be 30.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So you're saying that you're wondering if the board meeting falls under not the educational rules, but the normal rules, the rest of the society.
Right. I mean, even higher education, we are not falling under the same rules that we're looking at through K-12. So I would just be curious to know our actual numbers for capacity there.
There's posted in that room. I'll check it out and let Dr. Layden know.
And I would say if that were the standard, Meg, then all the more reason perhaps to move it to the cafetorium. That way you just eliminate any argument anyone could have that you didn't allow the public to be there.
Sure.
And you would also, I mean, we would have to change the design of the board table because we are not 6 feet apart. So I would assume we put one person at the end of a table and then the whole table is empty from there to the next. Because aren't they 6-foot tables or 8-foot? I don't remember.
Yeah, we'd have to lay that out, but to make sure that we follow that.
So my internet froze. I think I got the whole conversation, but the thinking is we would follow like the 6 feet, the mass, right? And then to Meg's point, the 50% of capacity or 50, whatever is less. Do any board members have concerns over that? Following kind of school rules and other limitations?
I don't know if it's a concern, but how are we going to videotape this? This seems like it might be odd.
Tim, I see that you just unmuted yourself. I was just going to ask you to talk about the viability of being able to do that in the cafeteria.
Sorry, my microphone. We can stream that fine in the cafetorium. The pan will obviously not be zoomed in as much on all the board members, but we can still stream it out and make it work.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Okay. So it sounds like that's, and could board members, if they, for some reason, chose not to make it, or are those rules different? It's still in phase 4 that they can, they don't need to have those sick work reasons?
No, if you are able to meet in person, then those rules in your policy are the only reason someone could participate yet not be there in person, and you have to have a quorum there in person.
Okay, so we're back to what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Policy 2-220.
Okay.
Thank you for those. Thank you for those 3 items. That was all I had.
Julianne, do you have anything?
I don't have anything extra tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any topics for future agendas? And we have no public comments.
Oh wait, Sean, I just wanted to make sure, sorry, I just want to make sure that we're still doing LGBTQ during the bullying presentation.
Yes.
Okay, just want to double check.
So, Dr. Layden, the Vision 2020, when do you think we'll actually see that plan?
Kaneland Connects, our next.
Yeah, I never get that right.
No, that's okay. We will, unfortunately, we're still working on it, and we still have meetings planned. Actually, the shirt that I'm wearing today is Elected and Committed, which is the direct title of that Kaneland Connects strategic plan. We do have more updates that we will provide in July, because one of the things that we do plan is something that's different is our commitment teams. So each of our 5 tiers or 5 strands of the strategic plan will have a commitment team attached to each one of those. And we will provide updates on that, how we're going to meet, and or how often we're going to meet, and then how we work towards the strategic plan. But obviously and clearly.
Oh yeah, I understand that things have gotten superseded. I didn't know if you wanted to like just officially kick it to September or October, something just to give yourselves time to focus on other things.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do. When we meet tomorrow and follow up and start that planning, we will make sure that the plan is safe and following the return to learn plan is safe, follows all of the state guidelines. And then after there, once we do all of the training we need to do, all of the hiring, shifting, adjusting, putting down arrows and signs, then we will get back to the strategic plan for sure.
Okay, anything else? So we do have closed session tonight. The Board of Education is scheduled for a closed session where there'll be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. Tonight, we have closed session for Illinois Code 122C2. Is there a motion to go into a closed session?
So moved. This is Aaron.
And a second?
I'll second it.
And a roll call. Do we have Beth? Roll
Beth's
call?
muted. Beth's muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
Mr. Rivas.
His mic's off too.
He said aye. Yep.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll go into closed session.